So, what kind of opera you seen? You know, I want to see. My favorite opera. I once saw kind of it was all.
Welcome to the Provo Municipal Council meeting. It is 5:35 p.m. on Tuesday, July 19th, 2016. We are gathered in the City Center chambers at 351 West Center in Provo, Utah. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, Provo Channel 17, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. The council requests that citizens help maintain the decorum of the meeting by turning off electronic devices, being respectful to the council and others, and refraining from applauding during the proceedings of the meeting. We will begin with a roll call. Mr. Parker?
Wayne Parker. John Curtis.
Gary Winterton. David Harding.
George Stewart.
Kim Santiago.
Dave Sewell.
Kay Van Buren.
Dave Connect.
Brian Jones.
Cliff Strachan.
Thank you. The opening prayer will be given by Ryan Harvey. He is our policy analyst and has recently taken a new job as the Administrative Services Director for West Point City, Utah, and his knowledge and excellent service has made him quite upward mobile, and we appreciate his opportunities, but we'll greatly miss his presence here and the work that he's done for our city.
Our dear kind Heavenly Father, we come to Thee at this evening with gratitude in our hearts for the opportunity to gather together as a city, with our elected officials, to discuss the matters most pressing to our city at this time. We pray that as our council members and citizens discuss the issues on the agenda tonight, that we'll do so with civility, and that we can keep a good spirit in the room. We are grateful for the service of our elected officials, and we are grateful for those citizens who have come and to express their opinion, and just grateful for the passion that the citizens here in the city of Provo have for their wonderful city and this country. We ask Thee for these things and do so in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. All rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. I now call for a motion to approve the minutes of July 5th, 2016 council meeting minutes, or discussion if there is any. Mr. Harding?
I will move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Winterton. Those in favor? Thank you. The voting is unanimous in the affirmative. The employee for the month of June is, the employee of the month for the month of June is Tony Fieldsted from Energy, and this presentation will be presented by our Director of Energy, Travis Ball.
Thank you, Council Chair, Council, and Mayor. I appreciate this opportunity to let you get to know Tony Fieldsted a little bit better. He's such a great employee for the department. I personally, he was my landlord 25 years ago. And for someone who had a landlord and knows and can say only good things about a person is a real testament to the character that he is. Tony's been with the city for 4 years, 4.5 years. But before he came to the city, he worked for Springville City, and there he was in charge of all the line crews for Springville. Basically, he was kind of like a director of Springville City Power. That's why we were so happy when he chose, after he retired for 30 years at Springville, he went into the contract world, did that for a while, and then he chose to come and work for us in Provo. And I can't say how happy I am that he did that. He's one of those guys in our department who just gets things done. He always has a good attitude. He's always smiling. He's level-headed. When I kind of get going, he's one of my influences that keeps the department steady. I think he just does such a great job. He has 4 beautiful girls and three beautiful grandchildren, and his wife back here, Kayleen. They've been married for 2 years. He's in the department. He has completed several substation upgrades of relays, and that doesn't sound much, but you need somebody that's very technical to do that, and Tony has done that. In fact, I would say Tony's one of those guys in the state of Utah who is very well respected. I don't know how many subtechs in Utah he's trained, but there have been many. In fact, some of the big contractors in the state, Tony trained them, and now they're multimillionaires and doing really well. But I think the knowledge that Tony gave them set them up for that. I don't know of anybody else who I am so pleased to have this award go to as Tony Fieldsted. Thank you, Tony.
That way I can't see where we are. 3, and again. 1, 2, 3. That one's
Thank you.
We are now pleased to have a presentation by the Covey Center, Oliver, and this will be introduced by Paul Jordan, our Center for the Arts Manager.
Thank you. I asked him to leave the podium here so that we had a little bit more room to move. While they're getting set up, one event that I want to bring back to your forefront is that we currently have Fantastics playing over in the Covey Center, and it runs through the 6th of August. So on Fridays, Saturdays, and Mondays, please come over and see Fantastics. This is theater time of the year. We just barely finished Seussical Musical Junior, closed last week. We have Oliver opening this week, so we invite you to come and see Oliver as well. We currently have the director, Laura Snyder, here with us today, and we have invited a few friends from back in the olden times that are going to come and perform for you for a few minutes, and then we have a little presentation that Jeff Snyder and Grace Thomas from Community Action would like to bring to your attention as to what we're doing with this particular show. So we'll invite our friends from the olden times.
Georgia? Yeah? Have you seen the way them quality gentlemen treat their ladies? Of course I have. Shall we show them how it's done? Definitely! Let's see, how does it go then, Georgia? It's all bowing and that's off and, Don't let your petticoats stain the linen line, my darling. And all go lost. No, all go lost. I'd do anything for you, dear. Anything for you. Mean everything to me. I know that I'd go anywhere for your smile. Anywhere for your smile. Everywhere I'd see. Would you climb with you? Anything. Wear a dapper do. Anything. Lay me off your will. Anything. Even like my will. Because I risk everything for one kiss. Everything. Yes, I do. Anything for you. All right, all of you do everything you saw Dr. do now. Let's do the words. My sweetie. Would you lace my shoe? Anything. Get your best light blue? Anything. Get your kangaroo? Anything. Put a tip or two. And back again. Would you rob a shop? Anything. Would you risk the drop? Anything. Though your eyes go pop? Anything. When you come down far? And everything we risk, I'm willing to keep you innocent. Yes, we do. Anything,
That was wonderful. Thank you. Do you have more to say?
We got just a little bit more that we want to present to you.
Okay, well, that was a treat, so.
Once again, as you can see, this performs July 22nd. It opens this Friday, and it runs through the 8th of August. On my left is Jeff Snyder. He is one of the co-founders.
Well, no, just the chief helper.
He's the chief helper with Alpine Community Theater, and Grace Thomas is here from Community Action, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to explain what we're doing with this specific show.
We want to thank you. Grace and I both want to thank you for making the Covey Center available. We're based in North Utah County, Alpine Community Theater, and we came down last year for Mary Poppins and loved it. We love Paul and the staff at the Covey Center, and in fact, another organization that you support actually put Grace and I together to do what we're going to do, and that is we are launching a campaign to support the arts and feed the children. Every dollar, every ticket sold, we will donate $1 to the Community Action Services for their kids' nutrition packs. And right now, Grace can give the details on how many kids are in need, but there's a lot of kids in need, and we wanted to do something as a nonprofit with another nonprofit to really do more and give back more to the community than even we already do with our theater program. Theater is such a great thing for kids. You saw the performers. What you don't see is the stories behind the scenes of how it helps them, how it empowers them, how it gives them confidence. It improves their schoolwork. So theater is important, and having the Covey Center here is just a blessing. And we thank you for that. We thank you for supporting downtown Provo, and Brady Curtis and his staff. They were just extremely helpful as well. You'll start hearing ads that have actually a couple of those guys in it that will talk about our program. And so we invite you to come to the Covey Center and buy a ticket and feed the children. I'll turn it over to Grace.
Just on behalf of Community Action, we thank you for your support of the Covey Center and also Downtown Provo, both of which put this together. And I'm in charge of overseeing the Backpack for Kids program, which we give to children in Utah County who qualify for free or reduced lunch. Last year we had demands for over $3,000 per weekend. Just with limited resources, we committed to doing $1,200 per week, and that's not even hitting everyone that probably could benefit from one. So we're really grateful for the Covey Center and Alpine Community Theater to actually help us keep that program running so that we can keep feeding those children that are in need. So thank you.
We are doing a special promotion, and we are going to invite Provo City to become a part of that. This is a poster that we'll give to your assistants to put up, and we'll also ask her to send out an email where if you put in a special code, all your employees and yourselves can get tickets for $11, and $1 of that will go to Community Action Services. Thank you again very much for your support for the arts and all that you do.
Thank you. Any questions that we can answer for you? This is going to be a great program. We're going to be able to feed a lot of kids with it. So,
Excellent. Thank you for creating this wonderful production to benefit such a great cause. I appreciate your work. We could probably use them today. I'm sure you are. Thank you. The public comment segment of this meeting is an opportunity for any person in attendance to comment on matters that do not appear as a public hearing on the agenda. Items not scheduled for public hearing are item number 4, number 5, number 6, and number 8. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence, should you not wish to speak, but to instead have your statement read aloud by the recorder. Please provide her with a copy of that statement. The council and administration will not take any formal action on the matters that arise during public comment. And just for your information, the following items will have dedicated time for public hearing, and those are items number 3 and 7, if it's easier to think of them that way. So those with comments are invited to approach the podium.
Mayor and council members, I appreciate your time. I'm Norm Beagley, Provo, Utah. I would like to go over something that is not on the agenda. First of all, I want to say on item number 8, we very much appreciate the city, the council, the planning commission, the staff in looking at this issue. Most of you are familiar with our situation and where we live, and you were out to our homes last year. Quite the sight. We very much appreciate the work that's been done by the city staff and presented to you. We 100% support item number 8 that's on the agenda tonight. We would ask you to please pass that. We would also ask you to please consider going back to the original amendment that was brought to you just a while ago last month and look at that in the realm of some of the things that we've seen on our home, next to our home, and that is a feedlot type situation where there are no stocking rates on the agricultural property in Provo. We would propose and ask that the council and staff look at doing some type of a stocking rate or some type of an amendment to the code that does not allow feedlots, which you get the idea of what happened next to us. The same thing could still happen with cows or horses or other animals that would be overburdening the land and not being allowed to basically creating problems with things like dust rats and other situations like we have found next to us. I have some pictures here that I'd like to pass out to the council, if that's okay, if I may give those and pass those out. There's pictures of the dust. There's pictures, obviously, of the damage that's been done to our home. The feedlot situation that was next to us, it's not now, and we appreciate, again, the city attorney office and staff trying to come to a solution on this, and we appreciate all that's been done. We feel like there's one more step that needs to be done on this to be able to make it so that we don't have that situation with other animals besides the pigs that would now be banned according to the amendment that's before you tonight.
Just for myself, and I don't know if others have the same question, but stocking rate, can you explain what that?
A stocking rate is something that would be placed on agricultural land. We would propose that it would be just like what the original amendment was that was before you a month ago, and that would be a certain number or maximum number of cows or horses or livestock that could be on a certain acre or certain acreage of land, therefore not completely decimating it, creating huge dust problems and health problems as well. That's what I mean by a stocking rate.
Okay, I just didn't understand the term, so thank you for
Am I okay
clarifying.
to hand these to the
Sure.
council? Again, we very much appreciate as neighborhood what's been done so far. We very much appreciate you having come to our homes and seeing the situation that we've been in. It's a lot better now. We have 6-foot tall weeds instead of pigs next to us, which we'll go ahead and take that. Any questions?
So in Provo, are you aware of any feedlots right now?
I am not, but that's the situation that was basically created next to us because of the use that was put on there and the I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting, and we will go to the first item of business, which is a public hearing on a resolution authorizing submission of a final urban deer control plan, authorizing implementation of the plan, and appropriating funds for the first year of the plan. This item will be presented by Bryce Mumford, our council policy analyst.
Thank you, Chair Santiago, members of council, Mayor. We wanted to come before the council and give you the information that we were able to receive. We've had conversations with a few of the individuals involved with some of the decisions. And so I have a presentation for you real quick, and I'll jump through that. And then we have a few people here for questions, and I'll introduce them at the end. And so some of the issues that Provo City's experienced are that there are deer living within the population and that they pose a safety concern. In addition to that, there's property and vehicle damage that's occurred as a result of these deer. And as the issue was explored, we found that there were other cities in Utah County and Salt Lake County that have an urban deer control program. And so we looked into those a little bit. But dealing specifically with property damage, between January of 13 and June of 15, there were over 80 separate incidents that were, and this data all comes from the police reports and information that came from the police, over 80 incidents causing $500 of damage or more per incident. And so this map is just kind of the red dots indicate where a lot of those incidents took place, and so based on the stats that we collected from the police department, we have property damage estimated at about $300,000 annually to Provo residents caused by some of these deer. There's vehicle damage at about $450,000 annually, not to mention the damage that's done to the deer. A lot of the deer are left, side of the road to die, and so there has to be a better solution. And so relative to police calls. It's not working. Can you move it forward, Ryan? It's not working for me. Okay, so relative to police calls, there were over 500 police calls that were incidents that were deer-related, and this is, again, a map with smatterings of dots all over the map from 2013, 2014, and 2015 of deer that were spotted or that caused a problem or caused an issue that the people felt the need to call the police, and so the police responded to these calls. And so you can see the major spatterings on University Avenue at the North Provo, and then there's also a smattering along State Street at South Provo. And so based upon this information, we felt like maybe we should look into an urban deer program. And so the state of Utah offers the urban deer control option, which enables a city to design and administer a control plan for lethal and non-lethal removal of year-round resident deer. And the two criteria is that they're damaging private property and threatening public safety within a city. And so just to kind of give you kind of a timeline of the work that's been done here, last year, in the spring of last year, DWR came to a leadership meeting and visited with us about what is required to have an urban deer control program. On June 2nd, with the help of Camille Williams, there was a public hearing in ordinance number 2015-23 making it illegal to feed wild deer, elk, moose, or turkey within city limits was passed. On July 7th, so a month later, there was a public meeting in resolution 2015-37 where we request a certificate of registration from the Division of Wildlife Resources. That was passed on that date. And so from that, the administration went to work putting a plan together. They submitted that plan requesting a COR from the Division of Wildlife Resources. And we just heard back from them in June approving our COR. And so on July 5th, we had a public meeting where the information regarding the tenets of the Urban Deer Control Program were presented to the council by Brian Cook, who is the proposed contractor that we proposed to work with. And then on July 12th, 2016, we had an open house at Timpview High School where we had over 130 people come, and we solicited some feedback from them. We tried to explain the Urban Deer Control program to them, specifically the lethal portion of that. And tonight there's going to be a public hearing. And so that's kind of the history of how we got to where we are today. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of information on the lethal removal program. It consists of archers posted throughout the city. There's costs initially for cameras, for reception of those cameras, for deer bait, and those costs total about $3,400 for the first year. Then we have a contract price tag where we've contracted with Humphreys Archery, which Brian Cook is one of the owners, if not the owner. He's going to run this program, and that is $10,000 for their equipment, for their transportation, and anything else that they need related to that program over the course of from August 1st through December 31st. That's the time period in which these deers can be killed. And so the food is donated to families in need. One of the costs that's not calculated in the resolution before you is the city would have to pay for the meat to be processed if we are going to have that donated to people. And so Brian Cook has a relationship with Honaker's Fresh Food Meats up in American Fork, and he's got a contracted rate for $85 per deer that is killed. And so I calculated that, assuming that the approved COR authorizes Provo City to thin the deer population by up to 300 deer over 3 years, so assuming 100 deer per year rate, basically, that deer cleaning or harvesting, the processing of the meat, would be an extra $8,500 that would need to be added to the appropriation amount. And so assuming that program removes 100 deer, the cost per deer is $219 based on those numbers. And so the translocation or non-lethal program is the program where the focus is to trap deer and then to relocate them in a different part of the state. And so after talking with Channing Howard, who's also here and would be able to answer some questions for you, the preliminary estimates that we came to are about 70 deer that could be removed in the first year. And that's based upon 10 traps, catching deer once a week, 60%, and it could be lower or higher than that depending on how mild or difficult the winter is. But based on those numbers, the The cost is $17,500. Now, there's a couple of concerns with this program. One of the main concerns is that the survival rates of these translocated deer is about 50%. So only about half of them make it through the transition, and there's difficulties in migrating and a few other things. And so if the city elects this option, we don't start trapping until December, and we would trap from December, January, and February through those months. And so that we'd have a few months to kind of work out those details with the DWR. But they, in talking with them, they gave me a preliminary estimate of about $200 per deer. And the cost is there because when the deer is trapped, it has to be tested for disease. And then an ear tag transmitter is put into its ear so that they can keep track of where it goes. And if it is sick, then they go out and they remove it right away from the herd where it's translocated. But these biologists have to come down, spend their time, and then injections of ibuprofen and an antiparasitic are given to these deer to assist them and hopefully help them survive in the wherever they're going. And so, assuming that we're able to remove about 70 deer, the cost per deer for this program would be about $250 based upon those preliminary estimates given to us by the Division of Wildlife Resources. So the last slide here, just wanted to give you some public input numbers and figures and numbers we received from the open house. Legal staff has been collecting emails from people since 2014 regarding this program. And they passed that information on to us, and council staff went through and counted each email to see which, had an air of support, which had an air of disapproval of the program. And for either method, we found about 84% of those emails we received were in favor of some type of program. One person was interested in just the non-lethal program. There were 8 against, and then there were 16 undecided, or 10% of the number of emails we received that didn't know which way they were leaning. And so at the July 12th open house, we asked each person who came to fill out their name, their address, whether they were for, against, or undecided. And the numbers at the bottom there indicate people who were for some type of program. 88% of those who came to that meeting were for a program. 11 were against, totaling 8%, and then there was 5 people that were undecided. And so the possible actions that council staff has recommended for you is that you can authorize just the lethal program. If you do that, you need to appropriate $21,900 from fund balance. A non-lethal program we would need to appropriate $17,500. If we were to do both non-lethal and lethal, we would need to appropriate $39,400 from fund balance. And so, and obviously any other action that council thinks could help fix the problem, I don't want to tell you how to do it. That's an option. So, I myself will be here to answer questions. We have Stephen Gray and Channing Howard from the Division of Wildlife Resources. They're in the back of the room. Camille Williams from Legal is here. She can answer some questions if you have something that's legal related. And is Brian Cook here? Okay, Brian Cook's on his way, so he eventually should be here. He's the proposed contractor, the person we would pay the $13,400 to if we decide to move forward with the lethal program. So with that, turn it over to you if you have any questions.
Mr. Sewell?
I have a question about cost. The per unit cost was a lot lower for the lethal, so could you review again why the lethal program number there is higher than the non-lethal?
What specifically are you asking about?
Well, in this last screen, it shows that a lethal program authorization would be $21,900. Sure. And the non-lethal was $17,000, but the variable costs were higher, so.
So there's costs, and this is just a little table that kind of shows what the costs are. The initial cost for cameras and for reception and for deer bait are going to be about $3,400. Take that $900 plus $2,500, that's going to total $3,400. Then we have a contract price with Brian Cook of Humphreys Archery, and he has a few other consultants, and they will be the ones that will be doing the shooting from stands throughout the city. And that contract price, which has been worked out, is $10,000. And then the final cost, the additional cost that wasn't included in that, is the deer processing. When a deer's killed, it has to be processed so that the meat can be used. We don't want to throw the deer away, and so we've contracted, and I've reached out to a few Provo companies to see if they'd be willing to do it for cheaper, and we can't find a cheaper price than $85. And so the Honaker's Fresh Meats up in American Fork would be the ones that they would take those deer to. They would process those deers. And assuming we have 100 deer at $85 per deer, that's an additional $8,500. So that's where the 21.9 comes into play.
Okay, and then if we could review the other one?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, okay.
And so one of the things that the Division of Wildlife Resources offered to do, traps typically would cost between $300 and $600, but they've offered to allow us to use their traps for the first year to get started. We would have to purchase ear tag transmitters, and assuming 6 deers per week for 12 weeks, that's 72 deer. Assuming we have 70 deer as part of this program, that's where we got that 70 number from. We would have to buy an ear tag transmitter for each one of those deer. And so that's where the $3,500 cost comes from. And then the $200 is the DWR contracted rate, and that's just a preliminary estimate that they've given to us as to what it would cost us per deer to have them come down, test the deer, give them the necessary injections, and they said that they'd work with us and the Mule Deer Foundation to move those deer out at no cost to the city. They have volunteers throughout the city, the state, that can drive these trailers and unload these deer in locations that are necessary. And so that's why it's a little bit cheaper than it could be, because we aren't being charged any money for traps and we're not being charged any money for transport costs. The DWR is helping us with those costs up front.
Okay, and there was a $10,000 contract fee on the lethal option, and there's no equivalent here, so what's the difference in those?
The DWR contracted rate is kind of like a contract. We would pay the Division of Wildlife Resources a certain amount of dollars per deer for them to come and test them. And so that $14,000 is in some ways equivalent to that $10,000 from Humphreys Archery.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mr. Stewart?
What kind of cost are we going to incur for traps year 2 and 3?
As I indicated, the cost per trap can be anywhere from about $300 to $600, and it just depends if we want to buy them, if we want to fabricate them ourselves. But the netting itself is about $200 per trap.
And we would need 10, so that's $3,000.
That's about $3,000 at a minimum.
So that makes that more expensive year 2
But
and
in
3.
year 2, absolutely. Unless the division was willing to help us again. She's back there smiling. I think that's a yes.
Mr. Connect, did you have okay. Are there other questions? Mr. Harding?
Yeah, trying to think if it's better now or later. Has there been any consideration of not using, not donating the meat and incurring that $85 per deer cost? If I remember the last presentation, other cities have looked at that and have chosen not to. And
Well, there is an option that if a person can, clean the deer themselves and process that meat individually, they can do that. I don't remember him saying that wasn't what. I mean, what else you going to do with the deer?
Right. So I believe that there were some other cities that had looked at it, and because of the $85 per deer, they chose just to allow their citizens to come and claim them if they were willing to clean them. My thought on that is, if you give it to feed the poor, maybe some aren't all that wild about venison, where if you have residents just come in and claim, only the ones who are willing to go through the work and they know what they're going to get. The other benefit, I don't know if the representative from Community Action is still here, but my guess is, if $8,500 could probably, if donated to these organizations, could probably feed a lot more people than the meat that would be produced here. So it may be more cost effective just all around to not allocate that $8,500 for meat processing.
Bill Williams.
I
don't know whether the division has any regulations about deer that are culled in an urban deer program. Is there any regulation about whether the meat must be donated and used, or whether the animal can simply be culled?
You have to salvage it. You have to salvage the meat, yes. You can't waste it.
My understanding is that volunteers or city employees will also be needed for the non-lethal program to bait the traps, to watch the traps, and that the DWR biologists will be on site at the time the deer are ready to be taken from the traps and translocated. Is that correct? So there are some costs that may not appear here, depending on whether we're using city employees or whether we're able to get volunteers.
Mr. Sewell?
Bryce, just one more clarification on the cost. So I just want to make sure, if it was an apples to apples, if we were doing 100 on the non-lethal, then we would change those two numbers of 70 there to 100. So we'd essentially be adding 30 times 250. So if you did 100 on both programs, then the non-lethal would be, I think, $25,000. Am I interpreting that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
The dollar amount, we try to put apples to apples at the top. You see, assuming a removal of 70 deer, cost per deer is $250. And so that would be the cost per deer with this program. The cost per deer with the lethal program is $219. So that's where we tried to make it an apples to apples comparison.
I see. Got it. Yeah.
So, but yes, Ms. Williams is correct in specifying something like I looked over. Employees would be needed from the city, and they would probably be needed to bait traps and set traps. They do allow volunteers to do some of those activities. So if we could find volunteers, but the volunteer program has to be kind of run through Provo City. So that's where an employee would probably work out best.
Do we have employees, Mr. Mayor, that could do that type of work?
The reason I'm hesitating is because, not having done this before, that's a really hard question to answer. I will say this, that from the beginning, we've approached this keeping both options open and viable, the way we got the plan approved and things. And if the council feels it's appropriate, I'd like to suggest that we continue to keep both tracks open as we move forward. And then as we find, having done this the first time, certain facts about, well, how much a volunteer costs or how much the employee costs, and we have the ability to maneuver in either one of those paths or both simultaneously, that's a good thing for us. It may be that a certain neighborhood is just not conducive to the bow hunt, and that we want a certain neighborhood wants to do it a different way than another neighborhood. And by keeping both tracks open, you give us that ability to be flexible around the city if that's feasible financially, which we don't know just because we haven't done it yet.
Thank you. Mr. Connect?
And there was a higher price tag. What was it, $35,000 if we did both at the same time?
It's close to 40.
Yeah, $39,400.
Yeah, and now I think that assumes the maximum take in both programs. And what I'm contemplating is perhaps not the maximum take in both programs, but both programs being used around the city. And so you wouldn't maximize both programs out, or potentially you could.
We can only take 300 total, so it would only be 100 per year, whether it was...
I don't know if it matters. If we could do 150 the first year, I think.
Oh,
But I just assumed 100.
I think someone from DWR would like to comment. Please come to the podium.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure, will you introduce yourself?
I am
to the
Shannon
public?
Howard. I've been running the Urban Deer Program for Bountiful for the last 3 years, and I helped kind of get some of these numbers kind of put up for you for the non-lethal side. I just want to clarify just a couple things for you guys. Since then, we've had some internal meetings. Our number per deer is $200 per deer. That's going to include that radio transmitter that'll go on every adult deer. So 200 per deer across the board, make it simple, easy for everybody to do math. Gosh, a lot of other things. I like what you said, Mr. Mayor, about coordinating the programs together. We have a couple other cities doing that, and that's really key. We have some areas where archery is not as safe as other areas, neighborhoods that maybe don't want archery, maybe neighbors that want non-lethal. I think that's a great option to keep those both open for your citizens to kind of play this out. Because I know you guys are taking on a big responsibility here with this program, whichever direction you choose, one, the other, both. So I just want to make sure you've got all the right information and everything. So I'm sure I have a lot of other comments and input just because I've been running a program before and kind of have some insight on really how to make it run smoothly and that sort of thing. 10 traps is a bare minimum to start with. In Bountiful, I was running 20 to 24 traps at a time. There was one day where we actually had a load, we caught 19 deer in a day. So on days like that, we really maximize our personnel time, and that sort of thing. Also in the future, if you guys look into building your own traps, your costs can be defrayed over the years because you can use them every year. Deer management is going to be an ongoing process for almost every city here in Utah. It's not just a 1 year in and you're done. In Bountiful, we're working on, this will be the 4th year of deer management, and we still have areas that are being hammered by deer. So we're in that management phase within Bountiful, so we're able to target specific areas now instead of making it such a big wide program. So I think that's kind of what maybe you guys need to look at is tackling this like really hard at the beginning, first couple years, and then once you kind of get the population down to a manageable level, maintenance. So I know that's a lot to chew this first year or two of a program like this, but take that into consideration.
How many deer did Bountiful have to begin with? What was their estimate? Do you remember?
We kind of estimated for them. It's really, really hard to know. Wide, broad range, 500 to 1,000. I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than that. Over the last 3 years of trapping in Bountiful, we've caught just over 500.
Okay.
So.
And that was your initial estimate, was between 500 and 1,000?
Yes.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Mr. Connect?
So I kind of like the idea of having options. If we hire a contractor for 10,000, I mean, I'm okay with that. You get what you pay for, but it's a large price tag. What are your minimums? I mean, if we just want to use your services in one neighborhood and we catch, just 10 deer in that particular neighborhood, is that a problem for you?
Not at all. In fact, that works great. We can target a neighborhood, take out 10, 15 deer, 30 deer, whatever. We'll make an impact in that area, and we'll charge them per deer rate.
So it's not like we have a minimum and you won't come unless there's so many.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Are there other questions? Mr. Winterton?
Yes, I had a question. If we have a 10,000 contract rate, and you probably don't know this, we may have to go to Bryce on this one. If we have a 10,000 contract rate for the lethal, is that prorated if we cut back the number if we're doing a two program, or is it 10,000 is it? No matter how many we get.
I would just also stress, that the lethal program occurs from August 1st until December 31st. The non-lethal program takes place from December 1 through February 28th, correct?
Yes.
And so they're not really overlapping per se, except for the month of December. But the contract rate for the $10,000 is only for the lethal, and if they kill 100 deer, then it's $10,000. If they kill 70 deer, it's $10,000. So it doesn't matter on a price per deer. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
And a follow-up to that, the way the COR is written, your 300 deer that you're allowed to lethally remove, 100 each year over 3 years, that's just the lethally removed deer. So if we go in and trap deer, we can go above and beyond that 100 per year. So that's another way to blend these two programs together to make maximum effort.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that because that was a question at the meeting too. There were some residents that said 100 deer, we're killing 150 with our cars a year. Is that really going to do what we needed to do? So I appreciate that clarification. There was another question, Mr. Sewell.
If we went non-lethal only, which I think is actually the cheapest, unless we're getting into pretty high volume. What kind of capacity do you have?
At this point in time, we are going to have probably enough traps, I'd say, to lend out 15 to 20 to Provo. But this can change every year. We have quite a few cities right now that are signing up for the non-lethal program, and we have X number of traps. So we're in the process, actually, right now. We had a meeting today to discuss what cities are on board, where everybody is in the process, and figure out how are we going to allocate these traps. So right now, I'd say roughly about 15 traps, I'd say I could see allocating to Provo at this point in time.
So about how many do you think that would enable you to catch during that time, during the season?
Our capture success partly depends on the weather. If you have a little bit of snow cover, you're going to catch more deer per day, per trap day. But on average, I'd say we got anywhere between 40 to 60% full traps. So if you have 10 traps, we'd catch anywhere between 4 to 6 deer a day on average. So multiply that out. If you're trapping 3 days a week over about 12 weeks, that's where we came up with the 70 number.
So that's your approximate capacity.
Approximate, yeah. It's really it really depends on the weather. Like I said, one day this last year we caught 19. I mean, that was just, it blew all of our minds because it was a really good snow day and the deer were hungry and that kind of thing. So if we have a low snow year like we've had a couple years before, that can change your trap success.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Harding?
So I'm just running the numbers, and it'd be good to make sure that I'm not missing something. So in the sheet, we were looking at roughly 250 for the non-lethal, but I believe you said that it would actually be 200 for the non-lethal.
Yes.
And that was, at least in the document that I have before me, that was for the first year, and it almost made, and there was another total here of about 35,000 for 1 year without.
So the $35,000 number came from our preliminary estimates before the DWRs came in and said that they would help us. And so that's not really a relevant number right now for the first, are you talking about subsequent years?
And that's what I'm getting at. It sounds like we might be at 200 for the first year, but then is that help there for the subsequent years? Or are we going to be moving to like a $500 per deer rough estimate for future years?
We don't anticipate it going up to 500. 200 is definitely for this year, and we'll probably reevaluate that number every year to make sure that it's accurate.
Okay. And then, thank you for that. And then we talked about the non-lethal, maybe the cheapest. I have the 219 for the non-lethal, for lethal, but if we were to go to not processing the meat ourselves and just allowing residents to claim them and process them themselves, it drops down to, assuming 100 that are cold, it drops down to 134 per deer. So as far as a per deer option goes, that's the cheapest. And one other thought, when we talk about a 50% survival rate, when balancing kind of the ethics behind lethal and non-lethal, we have to really understand what does that look like if 50% of them are not surviving the transplantation. If we have deer that grow up in the city, they're used to the city environment, and then they're put out in the wild, and 50% of them aren't making it. I mean, there's some ethical issues on that as well. It may not be within our sight, but it is happening, so we need to be aware of that as well.
So to comment on that, so Utah is not only translocating urban deer right now and doing a survival study on that, but we've been translocating deer from Antelope Island, from the Parowan Front, and a couple other areas around the state. Those studies are translocating wild deer, same time of year that we're doing the trapping in the winter. So those are wild deer being trapped and moved to another location where they're remaining wild. Those studies are also finding about a 50% survival rate. So our urban deer are surviving equivalent to wild deer in the state. And then average survival for non-translocated resident wild deer, adult females, this is all adult females, is about 85-86% for the state.
What are they dying of when they're relocated? Do you know generally what's like the major reason they're not surviving when they're relocated?
For my study, we don't have any of those numbers yet. For other studies around the state, they're finding that the biggest cause of mortality is predation.
Pardon me?
Predation.
Oh, okay.
So-
Because they don't have predators in the city, right? But it's same for the wild deer, but the wild deer on Antelope Island probably don't have predators there either.
Antelope Island, yeah, they don't have as much, but all the other been translocated around the state are susceptible to coyotes and cougars.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Winterton?
Yes, with regard to impact on Provo, 70 versus 100, what would that, and it's really going to be hard to tell, I think, are we going to say that our car accidents are going to be 30% more if we trap than if we do lethal?
Right now, you can't say anything statistically with our car accident rates and reducing populations of deer. I'm looking at that with my research project, but with the data we collect at this point, we can't make any conclusions.
When Brian was here, he mentioned that with Highland, they had 74 accidents, and the next year it was reduced, after their first year, it was reduced to 40, and then I think 2 years later, it was reduced to 6. So their accidents reduced to 6 in I think a 4-year span, if I remember right, when he presented last.
Actually,
But
I
that was
met with Brian today, but that information was incorrect.
Okay.
It went from 36 in 2013, fiscal year 2013, to 27 in 2014, 21 in 2015, and then fiscal year 2016 was 40. I just pulled those off of our statewide database.
So it went up the 4th year instead of going down?
But we had a harder winter, more snow cover,
Okay.
so that's expected.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why we're trying to get at this and why we're doing research on this to find out, can we make an impact on our accident rates?
Yeah. Mr. Connect?
So what I'm feeling good about is using the lethal option as the first priority, using the trapping in those areas where it's not practical to use the lethal, and having our residents sign up on kind of a waiting on-call list that would be willing to take the deer and incur the costs of the processing and whatever themselves. And I think you would find enough people willing to do that. If there was not, then we could process them rather than have it go to waste.
All right, thank you. You might want to sit close. We'll probably have more questions for you. Thank you so much.
And based on this new information, I just want to clarify that number for a non-lethal would be reduced to 14,000, and the non-lethal and lethal together would be 35,900. So just FYI, and then if you wanted to take Councilmember Harding's suggestion and reduce the $8,500, it would be $8,500 less. And I've not done the math yet on that. So, but I'll have it for you if you have a question.
Thank you. So we'll open this up for public hearing. For those of you in the public who have come to comment on this item, please come to the podium and state your name and city of address, or address and I guess city of residence. You don't have to give us your address, but just your residence.
I had to be first because I'd be too scared to talk. I'm Barbara Cox, and I live on the hillside. To respectfully Mr. Hardy's idea of people addressing the people that live in the area to do their own, as Kimberly can attest to, the meeting on the 12th was extremely volatile, and every person there, except for a few people that didn't dare comment, hate the deer. In no way are anybody in that particular neighborhood ever going to do anything good with the deer. There are neighborhoods, that 88% that he just took was from those people, and that meeting was everybody against it. And I believe in managing the deer herd. I'm also one of those rare people that also realize that we're in their habitat. And so I do want the management, which should be a good argument for you to keep both programs, because our neighborhood, I would say we could have had that many and more. They just love the deer and can't believe anybody would want to kill them. So if you did both programs in the neighborhood that hate the deer so badly that it was a vicious meeting, if you didn't agree, and let them have the deer killed in their neighborhood, but leave them in the neighborhoods that like it would be nice. Another comment I have is, and I could be wrong on this, but I talked to a few of the processing people that do deer. The 10,000 deal with the archers, saying that people could come, and have the deer taken. They're under the same FDA rules, since it's not a private person that is culling the deer, to have all the biology work done. And so the cost for that would go up a great deal. And in none of the other places in Utah have they taken the option to take the deer to the poor people. Not because of the cost. I mean, it is because of the cost, but because the people that want the deer dead aren't going to be the ones that care whether the poor people get them or not. So I would love to have the poor people have the deer, but it would be no less cost if the archer also had to go through that legal process of having them tested for wasted disease for what it has. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. I did fail to mention too that if you could take just 2 minutes to make your comments so that we can get as many comments as possible. We appreciate that. Pam Jones, Edgemont Neighborhood, Provo. A couple of points. Could you go back to the survey results? At the beginning of that meeting last week, the survey papers were handed out. It asked for a name, address, and yes, undecided, no. I raised my hand right away because I thought it was confusing. But Mr. Cook wanted to go ahead and start talking, and it wasn't until towards the end of the meeting that the choices should have been lethal, non-lethal, or combination. So the data is basically useless. There was a straw poll at the end of the meeting, and people stood up for which plan they wanted. Another thing, a question for those animals that are transported but don't survive, what happens to that meat? And then related to that, if Mr. Harding mentioned that people at the food bank might not necessarily want venison, Mr. Connect suggested selling some of the meat to people who want it. Now, I'm not a hunter, but I know that not all hunters are able to get tags. Those that get tags don't necessarily get an animal. Can we open up the sale of the meat to people who just want it, and then we can save money on the whole program? Thank you.
My name is Barbara Carter, and I'm in the Edgemont area. And I would just like to know if people can request that the traps be put in their own neighborhood, and or can we buy our own trap? Like we have 2 raccoon traps. We catch raccoons, we call up the animal control, they come and take them away. Can we do that with deer? Get our own trap, put it up, and if we catch a deer, call them up and say, come get this deer out of here.
I'm sure we have someone who can answer that. We'll address that question later.
My name is Matt Clark. I live at 968 Fur Avenue. And Council Chair and members of the City Council, thank you for addressing this issue today. It's one that comes with much controversy, but it's definitely something that I think it needs to be addressed. I guess my biggest problem with this program is the data that's been given to you by Mr. Cook. I think Mr. Cook's intentions are good. I think what he's done in some of these other cities has been good, but what I question is the information that he's given you. We've already seen that some of that information has been corrected by the division as far as number of animals that can be relocated and still survive. I think you need to know that the animal count that you're getting of 500 urban deer, I believe, is incorrect, because those counts are being taken from January 1 to March 1, and that's when you get a lot of migrating deer that come down that intermingle with the so-called urban deer. Most of the accidents that have been recorded in Provo City are recorded in the winter. And once again, you're dealing with migrating deer, not urban deer. So while I'm a big supporter of the urban deer program, I would counsel you, or I would suggest that you target those urban deer by restricting the dates of the lethal and non-lethal activity from August 1st to October 31st. That way, you're not getting into any of the migrating deer, you're just targeting the deer that so-called are living in the urban areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Are there other comments?
Just really quickly, my name is Norma Mitchell, and we live on the Canyon Road. We live at 2400 North Canyon Road. Myself and all the neighborhood, there's, we go from 2200 right up to about 2800. We have had, well, you know, we moved, all of us moved into the area of the deer. So we have had deer there since, I can remember the 1940s, right on up till now. I have a mama deer and some baby deer right there now. I just want to say I'm against both programs, and I just wanted to put my input in for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments?
Yes, I have a comment, and I appreciate your taking the time to discuss this very important issue. My name is Eugene Friedman, and I live in Indian Hills. I have 5.5 acres, and we have a herd of deer that live in our property. I've spent over $20,000 fencing in my property, which ultimately turned into a corral, because the deer come in right in my driveway and then eat whatever they want to eat. Fortunately, my wife's beautiful English garden now has a fence around it that controls that. But we've had several fawns recently die on our property because their mother apparently had been killed by an automobile accident. And it's a serious problem, not only for us, and we live on Mountain Ridge Road, but for all of our neighbors. And I speak for a large group of people that in the Indian Hills area that are very much in favor of harvesting the deer. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Are there other comments?
My name's Kurt Wood. I appreciate you taking a minute of your time. I'm from Davis County, so out in Bountiful, and I'm representing today Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife, which is a conservation organization. I just wanted to bring some information to you as far as the money part of this. There are a very good possibility of some matching funds available with the conservation permit money to help relocate deer. I've been involved in the in the Davis County deer relocation for the 3 years that it's been going on. Talked to a lot of the people whose neighborhoods we've taken deer from. I think it's a great program. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm a hunter. I'm an outdoor enthusiast, and our state's struggling with our deer herds all across the state. This is a great opportunity to take deer that are a problem, to move them somewhere where they can be viewed, enjoyed by other sportsmen and wildlife viewers. And so I just want to make sure everybody knows that should your council decide to relocate deer, there are a number of ways that there can be monies involved to help offset those costs. Mule Deer Foundation and SFW have funds from the Conservation Permit Program that are available for programs like this. As far as your traps going forward, there are dedicated hunter hours that those traps can be produced by people who have those skills, who have to work off hours for their dedicated hunter hours and stuff like that. So there's ways to offset some of these costs and benefit the rest of the state as well. So thanks for your time.
Can you describe what SFW is? The acronym?
Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife Conservation
Oh, okay.
Organization.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, may we ask that you leave your contact information with us?
Sure, you bet.
Yeah, thank you.
My name's Sharon Mehmet. I live up in the Edgemont area. I'm the vice chair for that area. Couple of points that I wanted to make. I was also at the meeting that Bryce tried to give you these numbers for. As Pam pointed out, it was a very hard to understand survey on the paper. But as we took the straw poll that she mentioned at the end, I didn't count the number. You're saying there was over 130 people there. A vast majority, I think you could easily say, stood up when you asked who was for both lethal and non-lethal options for this. There were, I didn't see the number for lethal only. I know it was smaller, and I happen to know there were two of us that stood up for non-lethal only. So there's that point. I've listened to this. I've tried to take in the numbers that have been given. One of my concerns, I love that it almost sounded like you were leaning toward non-lethal only, but I don't know if that's realistic, even though it's the way I would love to go. One of my problems with the lethal only is that, as Bryce pointed out, and the mayor pointed out, there are some neighborhoods that simply won't work. Population density. Bryce pointed out at the meeting that that I guess there's a 200-yard, 100-yard death circle that they have to allow for this deer wandering off before he falls down. And that he goes around and asks the neighbors if they're okay with that, which means that they could potentially say no in a neighborhood, which shuts him down again in that neighborhood. So for some neighborhoods, this could work, not at all. It could be a non-option. So you've killed it in those neighborhoods, those areas. And if word gets out, then the deer just move to that neighborhood, right? I don't know what kind of social media they have going on, but again, I love the trap idea simply because I feel like it's the right thing to do. Just because we can kill something doesn't mean we should kill it. I know their survival rate is 50%. I spoke with the DWR and the Mule Deer Foundation people, and they said that they're getting better at this. Their survival rates are increasing a little bit. I also wondered, as we look at the costs, as one of the reasons for giving us that this is an option, this is really a problem that we need to address, is the insurance costs. And I don't know how the city would go about it, but I spoke with an insurance agent who sounded really quite excited that if they simply donated even a part of this cost, their costs would go down tremendously, almost exponentially. So I don't know why we couldn't somehow get whatever the local insurance group is to donate some of the cost to this, to cover some of the cost, because they would be benefited as much as we would. I think that's pretty much all my points that I wanted to make, except that as I've spoken to different neighbors, and the other concern that you brought up was the harvesting. I did speak to neighbors who were concerned about that if we do the lethal option, that this meat is used. A few of them mentioned that they preferred to hear that it went to people in need. So I don't know how that would be done. I don't know how the city would generate a list of people in need that are capable of dressing it versus people who just are capable of dressing it and would use it. But that is one thing that my neighbors brought up. They wanted it to be used and for people that needed it more than just the sportsmen first.
Thank you, Ms. Mehmet. And thank you for your service in the neighborhood. as the vice chair. Are there other comments? Yes, please.
My name is Ruth Winterton, and I'm in Indian Hills, and I was impressed with the information about the non-lethal. And as far as the maintenance, it sounds like that could work over time. And it's part of the charm, honestly, of where in my little area of where I live, and some of the people I've talked to, but I know that there's a problem. And then finally, and I was also impressed with Mayor Curtis's suggestion that we also, as a democratic society, we allow people to have a voice in that neighborhood as far as what they feel like might work best for them as well. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you for, which one works? Well, thank you for considering this. We have waited for years for you to come and even talk about it. I just mainly have one comment to make. When we moved to Provo, Claire Friedman. When we first moved to Provo, we noticed that in the winter, the deer would go up into the mountains. And it was, opposite. In the summer, the deer would go up into the mountains because there was food in the mountains. But in the winter, they would come down. And that was okay, because we have probably at least 5 deer every night living on our property through the winter. Now, the deer are totally domesticated, at least in our area, and they do not go up into the mountains in the winter. In the summer, they are there all year long, and they are multiplying and multiplying. And we have truly, it has just been, today, we had a huge buck come in and knock the branches on our apple tree, and the apples were falling all over, and they were eating, and then he was eating them. But it is a terrible problem in our area, and they are not going up into the mountains. They are staying down all year long.
Thank you, Ms. Friedman. Are there other comments? Mr. Gleason? Are there deer at the airport too?
There are, but that's not why
I'm kidding.
here. My name is Steve Gleason. I'm in the Pleasant View neighborhood, and I'm not here for this particular issue, but if my wife happens to watch this, or my mother, and I say nothing, I'm in big trouble. We have 12 deer that live in my house, not in my house, but in my yard. 2 beautiful 4-point bucks that my brothers-in-law would all be more than happy to harvest for you if anybody wants to give us permission. They are completely domesticated. They are not afraid of us at all. You can walk up to them. We even have a little yappy dog. They charge the dog. I live right next to the football stadium in the Pleasant View neighborhood, and this 4th of July, when the fireworks went off, we got the greatest show of deer agility that I think anyone has ever seen. They charged through my yard. One of them went over a volleyball net. One of them got caught in a fence. We had about 100 people there to watch the fireworks. There were kids everywhere, screaming, yelling. 2 4-point bucks charging through our yard. A doe came later. They have no fear of us whatsoever unless they hear me pumping up my BB gun, at which point they will run. But that's the, sorry, DWR, sorry about that. That's, forget I said that. Now it's recorded. I don't actually shoot them, I just pump the gun. And but they don't. We could actually walk up and pet them. One got caught in a volleyball net in my backyard, a fawn. And my wife went out and saved it while the mother of this fawn stood right next to her as she cradled it and then released it. And immediately I said, "What are you doing?" Next year, that's going to be the reason that we have the most beautiful roseless rose garden in the city of Provo. So I'm more worried about the fact that they are not showing fear of us at all. They're actually coming toward us. We have neighbors who have complained that on occasion they've actually barricaded them from getting into their home, where the deer won't move, and they would like to go to their door, and they're afraid to go to their door. So I'm all for lethal, and 100's not enough. There are a lot of valley deer. We put the quotes up. I believe the other gentleman is right. In the winter, they are not all valley deer. But in the summer, it was the 4th of July, and all those deer were right there. Those are valley deer. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason. Are there other comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of this item, and we'll bring it back to council for discussion. Mr. Stewart.
For the purpose of discussion, I'd like to propose a resolution, a resolution authorizing submission of a final urban deer control plan authorizing implementation of a lethal and non-lethal plan and appropriating $35,000 from the general fund balance for the first year of the plan. And I say $35,000 because of what Steve said. I changed it from 25 to 35 because I think you need enough to get it done, and I trust the administration to choose between lethal. We're not going to choose tonight between lethal and non-lethal. We don't have enough information. But I think we should pass a resolution authorizing the administration to implement a plan using either or and giving them enough money to do a good job.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Is there a second? Mr. Connect, thank you. Discussion on the motion? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Before you vote, let me just take a minute to express appreciation to several people. DWR, a number of people have been extremely helpful with the city in helping us get to this point for several years, and also to Camille and the legal department, but for their willingness to navigate this difficult process that didn't have a legal remedy at first. We wouldn't be here with the solution before you. So thanks, Camille, and your team that's helped you, and those at the state level that have been extremely helpful through this process. And quite frankly, the cities that went before us to learn and experiment with this program so that we could have as much information as we do have.
Thank you. Mr. Sewell?
So I have a question for the gentleman from I forgot the name of the society, the sport, yeah, in the back row there.
SFW.
SFW. So if I'm understanding this right, we could save over $10,000 if we went with non-lethal only, if we could somehow get the capacity up. I think that's the biggest weakness of the non-lethal only, is we can only do 70.
Yes, I'm not sure where the 70 came from, so.
But because of the number of the traps that are available, I think.
Address it what we saw in Bountiful. Yes, you can only capture those deer in the wintertime, just based on the fact that they have to congregate in a certain spot. That's somebody's backyard where there's some food and you can make them go there, as opposed to in the summer when they can go a lot of places. You'll set a bunch of traps and there won't be any deer in any of the traps, or maybe one. But we were catching a ton of deer every day in Bountiful. We would trap 2 to 3 days a week, and you would cull out a neighborhood fairly quickly. We took, I don't know, maybe 13 or something deer out of 1 yard over a period of time in Bountiful. So the answer is yes, there's money to be had. We could probably arrange to have some more traps built. Within the sportsman's community and the conservation organizations, there are a lot of people who have a real interest in this, because we've done a lot of legwork throughout the state in taking care of land management issues and trying to bring back habitat and stuff like that. And then it's hard to propagate deer in those areas that had deer at one time when we were all young. They don't now. And so even getting a 50% mortality, we did 250 deer last year. So there's 125 deer that are out there multiplying and making better habitat. So yes, there's money to be had, and I think you could bump that up. I think 70 is a low number. I trap probably every day that we did it last year, and we caught a lot of deer.
Thank you. And I have a related question for our representative from the Department of Wildlife, Ms. Howard. Thank you. So you mentioned that the constraint of the estimate of 70 is mostly a function of available traps. If we were able to come up with some funds and some additional traps, could we get that number up substantially?
Yeah, if you had more traps, you're going to be able to catch more deer. I mean,
And your folks would be able to handle that?
most likely. Again, if we're running this program, we'd have 2 division employees there every trap morning, and then we would hopefully be able to gather support of volunteers to help round that out.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Harding?
With these traps, one of the things that I've learned listening here tonight is it may not be as clear on who are the valley deer or the urban deer and which are the visiting. And so if you have to trap, was it October, November, December?
No.
August 1st to December 31st was,
That's
for
for
trapping,
lethal.
and trapping was
we've been running it
December
December
to
through
February.
February.
Oh, okay. That's right. Okay. So if we were to catch, say, 70 or 100, do we have any idea on how many of those are the urban deer and how many of those are just down from the mountains?
We don't. That's actually a concern that a lot of folks have, that we have, our biologists in the regions have. One thing we're kind of looking at experimenting with is trapping a little earlier in the season. We've tried trapping later in the season, March, April, and it's like pulling teeth. So we're willing to try some experimental trapping earlier in the fall, to kind of see if we can do that. Also in Bountiful, a lot of the properties we trapped on were properties where the homeowner says they have deer year round.
Yeah.
So we were able to actually walk up to these deer just like
Mr. Gleason?
Yes. We literally rolled apples to these deer, and they would come running towards us. So we were able to really identify some of these deer based on some of behavior that, yeah, these deer are pretty familiar with people.
Okay. Thank you. One of the things that struck me is that much of the desire for this program is coming from people who are impacted by the year-round urban deer, the ones that are destroying their gardens during the summertime. We have a lot of data here based on accident reports and things like that, and I'm curious how that fluctuates, say the car accidents. How does that fluctuate between summer and winter? And if it's strongly biased towards the winter, if we have a lot more traffic accidents in the wintertime with deer, perhaps even if we were to remove all of the urban deer, perhaps we would still have a lot of car accidents just with the mountain deer coming down. And this is a lot muddier than I thought coming into this. And so I'd like to learn a little bit more. I don't know if we can. It might be nice to look at the data from that perspective and try to differentiate how much of the damage is being done by urban deer, how much is being done by the mountain deer just visiting. One thought, and it just left me, but one thought where I was getting at is, perhaps if this is a multi-year process, perhaps for our first year we might try non-lethal only and see what impact that has before going to the other. I know that, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Stewart?
This is basically why I want the administration to make those decisions, because we can't know tonight. I trust them, if we give them adequate resources, that they can figure out what's best. Even if we want to have them bring back I don't even want to bring it back. If we just give them the money, let them figure a program that's best for the city, and then go from there. Because we can't answer those questions tonight. So I just want to move ahead. We need to move ahead, do something, and then let the administration work it out. We do this all the time. We let them work out things. They have the resources. They know They know what they can use city employees to make traps, where they can set traps and all those things that we don't know tonight. So that's why I'd like to just give them the option of both programs, enough adequate money, and then let them choose. And they might go non-lethal completely, but I trust them to do whatever's best.
Mr. Connect?
So I'll admit, we have more than one problem at the same time. We have the urban deer and all the damage and problems they cause, and then we have the migratory. But the current time frame for trapping is going to focus in the December through February on the migratory, and yes, some of the urban. But I would rather do both and address both problems at the same time. And so I like what George had to say, that we're going to not be able to, we're not going to micromanage this. We're going to let the administration figure it out, working with all the groups that are interested in solving this problem, and come back and report and give us progress reports. And I think after the first year of doing some of both, we'll have a good feel of what to do the next year.
So this is a 3-year program, though, that we're addressing tonight. But I agree with looking at it each year, and then maybe even at the end of the 3-year, being able to reevaluate the effectiveness of what we've seen.
My motion is only for the first year.
What's that?
My motion was just money for the first year, where we can then review it.
Oh, okay.
That's
I didn't
the
catch that
question
part.
that I had.
Oh, okay.
Is it-
Because this plan was for 3
Is
years.
it's a 3-year vision, but I don't know what we're funding.
1 year.
Yeah,
My
but it's a
motion was
1-year
1
plan.
year,
Okay, I didn't catch that.
First year.
Yeah. And we have a problem, and we need to address that problem. And I trust the people like Mr. Stewart. I trust the administration, if they're willing to take this on, to come up with the best program either way.
Mr. Van Bruggen?
Just one little comment. As we look at this, we've had some discussion on how the harvested deer meat is used, and I think we kind of put that in there to make us feel a little bit better about killing a deer. I don't know that the cost of processing a deer to get it to where you can use it is probably more expensive than going to the grocery store and buying prepared meat you have. And so I don't know that we're going to have a lot of savings by opening it up to people that want to come and get meat. I mean, most of the hunters I know, we say sometimes we go hunting because we need the meat, but most of the time we go hunting because we enjoy being out in the mountains and doing the hunting. And the cost of a deer or an elk you harvest on a hunt is a lot more than going and buying the meat, if you want to go buy a half a beef or something like that. So I think that's probably not a big issue or a big element of the cost savings, I think.
Mr. Jones, did you?
I had 2 comments, one, I suppose, substantive and one procedural. And this is really just kind of a reiteration of, in some ways, of what Mr. Stewart said a few minutes ago. I just wanted to kind of walk through what the resolution actually does and point out that what's on the table in front of the council right now, it's not passage of an ordinance. It's not kind of a step-by-step bullet point of every detail of the plan. Really, the resolution that's in front of you, it just does 3 things. It authorizes the mayor to submit a plan to the division, and the critical question there is, you do need to specify if the lethal option is off the table and shouldn't be in the plan, that needs to be specified. If the non-lethal option is off the table and shouldn't be in the plan, that needs to be specified. But otherwise, as long as those both options are on the table, then the resolution just authorizes submittal of the plan. It authorizes the mayor to enter into a contract for the lethal removal if that's part of the plan, and it appropriates a given amount of money for the first year. And so And that's really all that the resolution does. And then I would just say as my procedural issue that there is a written resolution that specifically talks about both lethal and non-lethal. It's on the screen at this time. And my interpretation of Mr. Stewart's motion would be to approve this resolution as written, except for replacing the monetary figure at line 73 with $35,000.
We're also not necessarily tying to using Humphrey's archery.
I know, but those are estimates. So.
Brian, we're not, I want to remove that we're going to use Humphrey archery. That's a decision that needs to be made still.
Oh, very good. So your motion would be to delete the part that actually talks about the contract?
Yeah.
Okay. And I suppose as a matter of law, if the appropriation is only for 1 year, the mayor doesn't actually need council approval to enter into that contract. So you can authorize the amount of money that he can spend in the first year. And as you pointed out a few minutes ago, the mayor's office can dictate how that money is spent for deer removal during the first year, with the understanding among all of us that he's going to be reporting back to you about that in the next budget cycle, because you'll have to include the funds for year 2 in the budget.
Right.
So.
I'm okay with what you said.
Mr. Connect?
So in this document, it says through December 31st. Wouldn't we need to go through February if we're going to be doing the other option? That
I'd like to just say during fiscal 2016-17. Can you do that?
Sure, through fiscal year, for fiscal year 2016, 2017.
Right.
Okay.
I just want to give as much latitude as possible.
Yeah. So for just for the sake of clarity, as we come close to potentially a vote on this, yeah, thanks, Ryan. So line 74 should read for fiscal year 2016, 2017, deleting the rest of the date information. The dollar figure at line 73 should be $35,000. And paragraph 2, you got it?
Go back to line 50. If we're going with 35, that number needs to be 21,000. And on line 53, that needs to be 14,000.
Well, and that's fine. I'm not opposed to changing those. I don't think it's necessary, because that's a preamble about what the council came forward to consider, not a description of what they're actually doing. But that's fine. But if we could go back down to paragraph 2. I think we'd strike, Ryan, from the word, starting with the word an agreement, right there where it says an agreement. Strike everything from there until the next and. Well, until, through execute, sorry. Keep going on that second line, to the end of line 77, all the way to the end, right there. Okay, so if I understood correctly what you were just saying, Mr. Stewart, so this would approve the resolution appropriating $35,000 into the police department's animal control division for the next year, and authorize the mayor to execute all documents to implement the plan. And I understood that to be your motion based on what you just said.
That is a motion.
Okay, and I forget.
Let me ask the mayor, or Wayne, Mayor, are you comfortable that you'll find, do you want us to leave Humphrey archery in there?
I think it's fine either way. Those of us who have studied this for any length of time know that there's really very few options, and that they've qualified themselves in a very unique way to be the vendor. So I don't want to say from this dais that we've selected them and that they'll absolutely get the bid, but I'll just tell you that there's very few options that do it at the level they do it at.
But it wouldn't require, if you decide to do a non-lethal option, you wouldn't have to be required, would he, to use Humphrey?
Right. So I think the way you've worded it, it does give us the most flexibility in moving forward into a program that just has a lot of unknowns for us.
Fine.
And
That's what I prefer.
Right, and I think it's wise because we'll go into this and you're commenting how you don't have details tonight. We won't have details for weeks, and we'll learn about this after we do the first one, and we may have a different approach the second year than we do the first based upon what we've learned. And so giving us as much flexibility as possible is very much appreciated.
We haven't heard from Mr. Cook. Brian Cook came tonight. He did a presentation at our last council meeting, and I think our public meeting at Timpview, there was a large number that were interested in harvesting. We did do a straw poll, and the majority, it looked like the majority stood up for harvesting and relocating, and then when we was just relocating, there were 2, and then against the entire thing, there were a dozen people that stood up. And I do understand that the logistics of the meeting, and I would like to say that that those who are living with the problem have stronger opinions, obviously, of those that have these resident deer living in your backyard, and you can't use the quiet enjoyment of your property because there are deer back there. Your kids can't go back there. We heard testimonial after testimonial of one mother being surrounded by a doe and her fawns, and her children she and her children were in the middle of the circle, or another resident, having a cougar kill a deer in their yard. We've had a cougar sighting in my yard, so that I've experienced quite a bit of what was actually told in this meeting. I've had a couple of deer impaled on my fence. We've had an accident with the deer. I mean, I've experienced firsthand some of those issues, so the public relations side really does, or the public safety side really does resonate with me. I mean, the deer eat our plants, and for me personally, as part of living in the foothills, I love living in the foothills, and I love the wildlife too, but it's become a problem. And from what I understand, relocating doesn't seem to take care of the total problem, and it can be way more expensive than what we see here tonight, is my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong, but relocating seems like the price tag could really grow. And we might not, I don't know, and I fear that we wouldn't be able to reduce the numbers that we would be able to using the archers. And I'm really concerned about removing Humphreys Archery, because as we looked into this, we really only have very few examples in our state of what cities have actually done either program. We have Bountiful that's done the relocating, and we have Highland that did the archers, used the archers, and so I would actually like to hear from Mr. Cook. We have heard from you before, but I don't think those that are here have heard from you. But if you could just take 5 minutes and just explain what your thoughts are on the lethal side of this, because we have heard a lot about the non-lethal tonight.
Well, thank you, and it's been a 1.5-year process, I think, since I've been first coming here. And to be truthfully honest with you, I don't really care what your city does with the deer. I mean, it's your city, it's your problem. I just voiced my opinion in Highland and got nominated to help. So in Highland, I understand that the division pulled our feet out from underneath us with numbers tonight earlier, which those numbers that I gave were from the division, right? Correct. So the numbers from the division have been changed from the division, but those numbers were given to us from the division. So where those numbers are, then they can change them at will, apparently. So anyway, that being said, the numbers statistically of what we removed for deer were great. They can't take that number away. The numbers that we did remove, the people that were fed by the animals, you have a deer problem. There's no doubt about it. You have a lethal removal program that you're running right now. It's lethal removal by car. So it's not that it's new or foreign to this city. It's just a choice that you got to make, whether you want to do it a humane way and do something with the meat, or whether you want to just continue to hit them with cars. If you want to do, I agree with the division and the fact of not keyholing yourself into a one resource. Don't just do lethal, and don't just do non-lethal, because you're going to pigeonhole yourself into a position to where you don't have a choice. But you need to do something, and once you statistically see what you're doing going forward, then you can mediate it. Then you can slow down the process of whatever you want to do. I personally love the animals. I would be in volunteer of being able to pick everyone up, but I just sat in a meeting this morning with the division where they said, we have not enough volunteers to be able to move forward with any new cities. Was that not the conversation this morning? You were in the room. So it's going to rely on volunteers to come in. Yes, there's SFW. Yes, there's the Mule Deer Foundation. They're great people. They're great organizations. I'm not discrediting those people at all. But you are relying on a volunteer resource to come in and take care of your deer. Those are people that have full-time jobs that are giving it up to say, yeah, I'm going to go down to Provo this weekend, and I'm going to make sure that I'm there so that I can help transport their deer. That's your choice. So, love to help. If you don't, it's not a big deal. It's no sweat off my back. Matter of fact, it probably makes my life easier. So, anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you for the few minutes, and good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments.
If I might have just a minute.
Mr. Harding?
Sorry. I had a question for Mr. Cook.
Mr. Cook, do you mind coming back for a question from Councilman Harding?
So 2 weeks ago, I thought I heard you say that in Highland, they had investigated the option of using the cold meat and donating it to food pantries, but that the cost of processing the meat was so high that they decided instead to just give the animals to residents who stepped forward and said, hey, I'd like to take it, I'll process the meat and use it myself.
So the first year, Highland, actually, we did run a program where we donated all the meat. So
Okay.
city matched. So the city of Highland was intended to match a dollar amount, and then the state agencies were going to match a dollar amount to try to get that into an FDA, which all the meat was delivered to an FDA processor. And for the recorded purposes, I'll leave out that FDA processor. But that meat never ended up at the resource. So neither the city was charged, nor the division or the other state agencies were charged for that meat. But the meat, there was 5,200 pounds of ground venison that ended up at a meat locker in Salt Lake City. It was intended to be intended to be used through the food banks. I went forth and did the actual calculations by going to the mission centers where it was intended to get to, and got the calculations of what that meat and how it would have fed. So that's where those numbers come from. Now, after that, the people of Highland came forward and said, wait a minute, if you're donating this meat, is there any way we can get it? So from Highland forward, and even Harriman last year, because Harriman's now started in the program as well, all the meat was donated just to individuals. We have a list of people that will take the meat that fast. It doesn't cost the city $1 to donate the meat. The animals will be 100% consumed by your folks that are coming forward and saying, hey, we want this. We looked at an option because the city asked, is there a choice or a chance that we could pay a fee? So I went to a different processor rather than using the one that didn't produce last time to find out if that was an option. That's where that money comes. So it's not you don't have to pay to process these animals. These animals, that includes the fee that we have so some people are saying, well, what does this $10,000 do? How are you utilizing the $10,000? We have to pay for the cameras. The cameras that go on these are 24-hour surveillance. They come to us immediately. Every time a camera goes off, we get a text message. The specialists know informed exactly what's in front of that bait site all the time so that we can be the most effective. We're not spending countless hours in ground blinds or in a stand waiting for these animals. It becomes a science. Your animals are like clockwork. They move through the city on a designated time route. They do. Now, you'll see on the cameras, we see when the migratory deer come in. All of a sudden, a deer appears that we haven't seen before. There's a good chance that's a migratory deer. The deer don't typically start to migrate. We haven't seen a migration in a long time. Last year was the first time you'll see a few come down, but other than that.
Could you outline quickly, just for so I can keep it all in my brain, the cost? So you said cameras, and then if you could outline the cost.
We have cameras, we have feeders, we have ground blinds, and then we have the specialists and all their equipment. So I provide all this. So the specialists are volunteers. I wish I could pay them, but unfortunately, we can't afford the specialists that are. Some of these guys are more money than I make a year. Okay, we couldn't afford their hourly rate. But what I do is try to compensate them for all of their equipment. I don't want it to be anything out of their pocket. I'm I'm trying to cover some of their fuel expenses. I'm trying to cover all of their accessories, meaning from their bows all the way through their equipment, their hunting arrows. Every arrow has to be equipped with their phone number, their cell phone number, their hunter identification number, and then we have a specific color that we use that identifies us and protects the people in the program and protects the city against poaching inside of your city or us getting falsely accused for an action that wasn't us. So all of the arrows are identified. So I provide them all with a cost from our locations, one of our locations. We're not even making money on it at the business. So I provide all that money into their account so that those guys can utilize, so that it's not costing their families their time and their money.
Just for clarification on that then, so the $10,000 covers cameras and bait and arrows?
Baits, all the equipment. So, and when we have to come up with the replacement cost of all the cameras that get stolen in the, for bait. Right, so which is the monthly service. Okay, so he's just saying that he's at, so there's 13,400, which is on top. So what we do is we provide all the equipment, and then the city, depending on how many cameras we run, you pay for the service on the camera.
Okay.
The monthly service on the camera and then the bait, so.
Okay. And then, I don't know who would answer this, but did I understand that by law, all of the meat can't be wasted? It either needs to be processed or it needs to be donated. It has to be used. It can't be
Has
wasted.
to be utilized.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And you can't sell it, which I heard earlier, somebody said.
Can't sell it.
Can we sell it? No, you cannot sell it.
What about the comment of that we would have to, even if we're giving it to someone who's willing to accept it and use it, that it would still have to be tested and?
It's donation, they take that animal upon themselves. It's no different than if it came off the mountain. The tag has to stay with the animal. So your city's issuing a tag just like the other tag. The tag has to stay with the meat.
Okay.
So when that animal transfers into the possession of the other person, he has a tag or she has a tag for that animal, which the division recognizes as a certified animal. So,
thank you. Yep. And with that, just a heads up. I believe I'll be submitting a substitute motion to reduce the number from the 35,900 down closer to 30,000, with the thought to not pay the $85 per deer processing fee. So just wanted to throw that out to my fellow council members.
Is that a substitute motion now, or are you going to?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Connect?
So a question for George. With your motion, are you comfortable where it leaves out this company and only leaves in the Division of Wildlife Resources? The way it's worded, it implies that we're only going to do the
No, we're not
removal.
eliminating them at all. I'm just saying that the administration has the opportunity to negotiate with them, with the Division of Wildlife, once they decide what they're going to do. We don't know what they're going to do yet. So I'm just trying to not micromanage. I heard that word used before. Let's just give the administration the ability to use, not use, use one.
So what would happen if we just left out paragraph 2?
Well, paragraph 2 is actually, at least the language that's still in paragraph 2, is not about who's going to take the deer. One of the elements that legally has to be satisfied is that the plan has to be submitted to the division for approval, and that's what paragraph 2 says right now.
That's all I'm asking to be done.
Okay. So what the language that's in paragraph 2 right now isn't about agreeing with the division to take some of the deer. It's about submitting the plan to the division so that we can go forward.
And I'm just trying to give the administration the ability to get a plan together, the best one, given the information that they're going to gather, because we don't have it tonight in my mind.
Sounds good.
So, Mayor, when we first discussed this, it was our administration that went to Mr. Cook initially because he was the only, or the specialist that we knew about. Do you have any comments about that part of it?
Well, earlier I mentioned, but for several people, we wouldn't be here, and I should have included him in that list. He's been very instrumental, not only here in Provo, but throughout the state. And if I'm right in that we sense just a tad bit of frustration in his voice, where'd he go?
That's right.
He's down there. It's because he does this really for a love of nature and love of the animals and also quality of life issues. And that makes him a terrific partner for us in moving forward.
Ma'am, I just want to tell you that the public comment portion of the meeting is over, but you can leave your comment with our recorder. She will, I know, I'm sorry, this
is real short.
Well, we would like you to leave the comment right here with our recorder. She's sitting at that desk and she'll be happy to take your comment. And then we'll, maybe if you, once you have the comment, if you don't mind passing it to Mr. Strachan, and we can pass it along that way. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm not, no.
So are there other comments from council members?
You got 15 seconds.
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. The public comment portion was earlier, and we would like to hear your input, but if you could just give it to the recorder at this point. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, if you don't mind leaving your comment with her, I'd appreciate it. It's okay. Thank you.
Bryce wants to tell us something.
There was just one question in public comment that we wanted to make sure that we answered.
Okay.
Regarding if residents can buy their traps, and I wanted Channing Howard to have a chance to answer that. Can residents buy their own traps and trap deer?
Residents can't do that on their own, but that might be a way to defray the cost of the city buying traps. If residents want to pool their money in a neighborhood or something, get some traps for their neighborhood, we could put those traps in as part of the larger trap and relocation program within the city, but they would not be able to operate or trap deer on their own.
Okay. And where would you like them to report that they'd be willing to do that? How would they communicate that with the city? Do you prefer to do with the city personnel or through you? How is that?
They could either work through the city or the
Yeah,
regional division.
I would say as we get ourselves organized and set up, we'll have a contact person at the city who'll be responsible for the program. And actually it's a good idea because that could increase our resources.
Yeah.
And until then, they can email the mayor?
Sure. Everybody, yes, john@provo.org.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Are there other comments? Mr. Sewell?
So I think the majority of my constituents who've responded to my email have said that they would like this to be taken care of as efficiently as possible. And based on the information that we had at the time, it seemed like that was involved using the lethal method. But what I've learned tonight, which surprised me, is that it's actually significantly less expensive to do the non-lethal only versus doing both legal and non-lethal, lethal and non-lethal, because of the fixed cost of the lethal. And so as I've thought about that, the only real drawback is capacity. Can we get above that 70 number? So the other thing I wanted to say, and I do have a substitute amendment to propose, is there are two other segments of my constituency out there. There's one segment, and I don't know how big it is, I think it's a minority, but that would just prefer not to do anything at all, leave the deer alone. And there's another segment that is bothered by the idea of arrows going off in their neighborhood and deer wandering up to 100 yards before they fall over on somebody's lawn. And we heard one of those tonight with a quivering voice. We've had this problem for decades, so I just want to throw out a substitute amendment, and if this doesn't gain traction, I'm happy to support the other proposal. But in deference to those segments of our community, I would like to propose that we try for 1 year using just the non-lethal method and exploring some of these resources that have been offered to see if we can get the capture rate high enough that it's doing the job. And then if we can't, then we come back 1 year later and say, okay, that didn't get it done. We spend the more money and we do both components of the program. So my substitute amendment would be, I'm not sure if, I don't think this was one of the options, but to modify one of the drafts to be non-lethal only, and an amount of money that would allow, let's say, up to 150 to be taken. So I guess it'd be 150 times 200, yeah.
Okay, so I think technically the way to do that would be to, and let's wait until there's a second,
Yeah,
but
see if there is one.
But just so people know what they're voting on, at line 73, the $35,000 would change to $30,000 based on 150 times 200. And the way to accommodate the non-lethal only plan is that you'll see at line 80, there's a reference to Exhibit B. Exhibit B is actually the plan document that would go to the division, and it currently contemplates both plans. And so I understand your motion to be, it would be a direction to staff to amend Exhibit B to remove all references to the lethal plan.
Right, and then instead of 150, because that makes it look, let's just say 100 or 20,000, because that would allow us to go up to 100, and if we're having success, we could authorize more later, right?
Right.
Would that work?
Right.
Okay. So my amendment would be those two changes: non-lethal only, authorize up to $20,000.
Let me ask, I'm sorry, because I fear this is going to complicate things too much, but and Ms. Williams, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the plan that gets submitted goes up in conjunction with our COR, which is our certificate of registration, which is a 3-year plan. So it occurs to me, despite what I just said, that probably the best thing to do is to leave Exhibit B as it is, with references to both lethal and non-lethal, so that those are options during the entirety of the 3 years.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But to instead have what your motion be is that paragraph 1 says $20,000 to be spent for non-lethal deer removal services in fiscal year 2017. And then the lethal is still in the plan, so it's still approved long-term, but you've dictated that the funds that are appropriated right now are only to be spent for non-lethal. Does that make sense?
To see if, yes, that's exactly what I would be looking for, to see if we can get the job done with only the non-lethal.
Does that make sense to you?
That makes sense to me. I think that there are obviously some details that will have to be worked out that might mean additional appropriations or fewer deer, in that I don't think DWR covers bait, for example, or other things that might be associated with the traps. And so the flexible plan discussed some flexibility would have to be built in whichever method is used. And I don't know whether DWR has any direction about whether either proposed resolution would comply with the core. And we might, since they're here, maybe we should ask them.
Do you want to answer that question, Ms. Howard?
So can you restate the question so I can make sure I answer it properly?
The core, the certificate of registration we have right now includes, it tells us you can take 100 deer lethally, and then you can do non-lethal take in conjunction with the DWR, and no number is given.
Exactly.
So if we go only with non-lethal for a first year.
For non-lethal, we don't.
We're still okay.
Yeah, so for non-lethal, there is no set number that you can take. For lethal, we've got 100. Again, I want to encourage looking at both things. Their timeframes for trapping and lethal are different, and you can do some in one area, and you can do lethal in certain areas and non-lethal in other areas. So I just want to encourage again, to keep an open mind about the type of programs. But 100 lethal, and then we leave the non-lethal number open because it's going to depend on how many traps you use, division personnel, how many days you trap a week, and that sort of thing.
Are you convinced you can make a difference with just trapping, or do you feel like
Probably not. It's the population here in Bountiful is significant.
Provo.
And yeah, sorry. Oh, this is what I get for working in Bountiful so much. Oh my goodness. So same thing in Bountiful. The population was very, very high. The number of deer we have to take out in a city that has a high deer population to get it down, it's beneficial to use both, in my opinion.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair, I also had a question about people getting caught in those traps. Is that impossible?
Are you thinking about letting your children get in there for a
Yeah, my
while?
grandkids, they'll go pet or something. I don't know what they'll do.
No, so there's an opening in the bottom of the traps about like this, which if a dog or a cat gets in the trap, they can get out. But the bait that we use for them, for the deer, is we generally use apples and hay. So really only deer like that bait. So we haven't caught any children yet.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, if I might, just can I restate the motion as I understand it, and Mr. Sewell can confirm. So, my understanding is there's a substitute motion on the table to change, to adopt the resolution as it currently appears on the screen, except for to modify paragraph 1 to appropriate only $20,000, and for that appropriation to only be for non-lethal deer removal for fiscal year 2016 and 17. Is that right?
Yes, except could we phrase that as a substitute amendment to the motion that's on the table?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second that for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harding.
And if I can take this discussion, I think there's two very valid points that have been discussed. I think that the flexibility is, I think it's wise for us to leave that open for the administration to use their wisdom and to move forward with it. And Mrs. Howard's opinion that we need both to really make a difference, that to me is pretty powerful. On the flip side, as Mr. Sewell has said, we've had this deer problem for decades, and we're doing something about it this year. And if we do only non-lethal, and then we evaluate, another year and say, oh, wow, we threw everything we had at it and we didn't make a difference, let's add in the lethal component next year. I don't think holding off one more year on the full assault, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, and it might lead us to the point where we solve the problem only through non-lethal means, and if that's an option, that's something to consider. So I don't know where I stand on that, but to me, that's the question before us.
Mr. Stewart?
My constituents don't think we have one more year. I think they wanted something done this year. I think that's what I think if you talk to the public, I think they would say putting it off a year, seeing if we can do something non-lethal is not satisfactory to me.
Just a reminder to that there is no clapping or cheering in the meeting. We did have some clapping this morning, earlier, so we were kind of a bad example when we clapped for our Employee of the Month. But just to maintain the decorum of the meeting, we'd appreciate it if you don't, if you hold your applause. Thank you, Mr. Sewell.
Just one point of clarification. I don't view this as putting it off for a year, and if the department is not confident we can get above 70, then that's not going to cut it. The reason I made the motion is based on the assertion that there may be groups out willing to help and ways to get more traps and to get significantly above that 100 number. And if there's a reasonable chance we could do that, that's why I made the motion.
So for what I'm hearing, even from the Division of Wildlife Resources, which would handle the trapping side of it, is that's not adequate to just do trapping. And so for the first year, I don't know that, for me, I prefer both. And I, you know, I am on that side that lives with it every day. And I do see the need to take care of some of these problems. We have a herd of 20 deer that walk down our street. You know, I've watched, as I said, 2 small deer get impaled on our fences at different times. And to hear, or for my children, my son was the one that found it, and to hear the crying that they make when they're impaled it's not a pleasant experience either for my children to hear that. And so the fact that another family member hit a deer, I just think for public safety and for just the humane part of it, I would much rather, and with the experience of having the deer impaled, I mean, it was dragged across our yard and our driveway, and you know, my husband had to go out and clean it up and spray everything off so that and I had to keep our kids in one area so they weren't watching what had to be done to take care of the deer. To me, having a specialist, an archer who's proven that they've been able to do this in another city and do it well, and they didn't lose an arrow and they didn't lose a deer and they cleaned up so that the residents didn't have to clean up, you know, makes a lot of sense to me to have them taken care of that way rather than having them be hit by cars. Because if we just did relocation, I mean, how many are still going to be hit by cars? I don't know if we're not taking as many numbers. And we may still be picking up their dead carcass off the side of the road and taking them to the dump. And we might not reduce those numbers like we hope. And we may still have them impaled on fences and have that kind of scene at home. And we may still have the public at risk with, you know, the wild animals coming down, the predators coming into the city, which is also a risk that concerns me, living very close to where the cougars live. And so it's a public safety issue for me, as I mentioned before. And I think the administration reached out to Humphreys because of they have a track record, and I don't know that you can just put out an RFP for someone, you know, with those skills and get, you know, as the mayor has mentioned, you can't just go and handpick someone. I mean, you can't just go and, you know, take RFPs for something like this. So my preference would be to leave Humphreys Archery in this, and it sounds like they would probably go that direction anyway, but I just think it sends the message that we're grateful for the work he's done over the last year and a half, and that we have confidence. I personally have confidence that if they were in my backyard, that it would be handled really well. And I like having that confidence, knowing that they could be in my neighborhood. It was mentioned that, you know, they'd just be walking through yards. I mean, they will have permission to be where they're going to be, and so it won't be, you know, surprise neighbors saying what's going on. You know, typically, right, is that they'll have certain areas where they're going to be doing this, and it'll be pre-approved, and the city will know, and our own animal control specialist will know. So I have a lot of confidence knowing that we have someone trained on that side of it. And then I also have confidence and I like the idea of relocating too. And I like having both of those options open and having the DWR do what they do really well and relocate some of these animals. I don't want to see animals die, but they're already dying. And so I'd rather they die in a humane way and we can actually use the meat. And that does provide me some comfort. I know that I do feel better about that, having it packaged. And if we have to pay more to have it packaged and have it FDA approved, then we can send it to these needy families. I'm actually fine with that. With paying for the money for that. And so I know most of my constituents they want the lethal, or the relocating, they just want the deer problem taken care of. And I worry that if we just go relocating, we're not going to take care of the issue in this first year. So, or even make a dent, really. Just from what I understand, relocating is a lot more difficult, and the volunteer factor of trying to get people to help out, it just seems a little more challenging to get results that way. And like I said, the deer are dying anyway, and which way do you want them to die? impaled on fences, hit by cars, and Dr. Shakespeare was not able to be here tonight, but he came to our, oh, are you here? Okay, he's here tonight. He came to our first meeting when we had the no feeding of the deer ordinance and mentioned some of the issues with just public safety in general when people hit a deer. Those deer accidents, they said it was about a $3,000 price tag for damage, but I don't think that includes injuries to the passengers or those kinds of things. And how do you put a price tag on that if someone has to swerve and miss a deer and hit something else or someone else, or hits the deer and the deer comes to the windshield? I mean, the options and the possibilities there make me feel like we do need to do something about this public safety issue. And I like leaving both options open. I like having someone like Mr. Cook, who has a proven record to be there, someone we have confidence in, has done it before, knows what he's doing, who's helped us for the last year and a half. So I guess this is a plea to my colleagues to let's leave it in there and leave those options open, and so that we can make a significant difference. Mr. Connect?
So do we vote on Mr. Sewell's substitute amendment first, or what's the next step?
Then it would go back to the original motion that Mr. Stewart made.
Right, but we haven't voted.
We haven't voted on Mr. Sewell's. Yeah. So we vote on that, and so if you would restate Mr. Sewell's motion. Ms. Weiss, thank you. Everybody clear on the motion? Okay. Those in favor? Oh, sorry. Do we have, you had a second, yeah. Those in favor? And those opposed? And abstaining?
I guess I abstain.
Okay. So those in favor are Mr. Sewell. Those opposed are Mr. Connect, Mr. Van Buren, Ms. Santiago, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Winterton, and abstaining is Mr. Harding. So now, question?
No, I've forgotten George's. Was it to appropriate 35,000 or up to 35,000, depending on how we allocated the programs?
It was 35,000.
I would like to make a substitution.
I'll change my motion to up to 35,000.
Okay, and I will go with that. That's, thank you.
Same thing.
I couldn't hear that. What was it?
Change his motion to up to 35,000 rather than.
That was really my intention, Gary just clarified it.
Mr. Harvey, can you add the words up to in front of the dollar figure? And Mr. Connect, I assume that your second still stands?
Actually, I would prefer that we do specify the archery company or LLC. Those are my feelings, that we make it clear.
So you withdraw your second?
Yeah,
So you're withdrawing your second on the motion?
yeah.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion, on Mr. Stewart's motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Winterton? Is there discussion on the motion? Mr. Harding?
I'd like to make a substitute amendment, which would be to reduce the amount from actually, if I could ask a quick question on that. So if we were to appropriate up to 35,000, at what point would that exact amount be decided? When would that appropriation take place?
Well, as Mr. Strachan just pointed out to me, technically it doesn't really matter whether you add the words up to or not. Essentially what it does is it puts $35,000 in that budget. And then it's up to the administration, animal control division, to actually decide whether they're going, they don't have to spend it all just because you put it all in the budget. And it'll be handled the same as other excess budgets if it doesn't end up getting appropriated. If it doesn't end up getting spent, sorry.
So with that, I'd like to make a substitute amendment to reduce that to $30,000 with the understanding that the difference would be coming from the processing fee, which I believe that we have families, in our own community that would be willing to process the meat for themselves, and I think that's a fiscally responsible thing to do for our citizens. And if we want to make a difference to the hungry, that our money would be better spent donating it to community action or a like organization, we would get more mileage from that money. So sorry, I'm rambling a little bit here, but my substitute amendment would be to reduce the number to 30,000 for the program.
Mr. Stewart?
Just as a reminder, they're not required in my motion to use any money for processing meat. They can still donate it if it turns out to be the best way. So I would hate to eliminate that option. What you're doing, your motion says that you take away that option from them to have that meat processed.
So my motion would be only to reduce that number from 35,000 to 30,000, and the rest was just kind of the reasoning behind it. So it doesn't necessarily restrict them, but I think if we don't do the processing, then we can easily do everything for 30,000 or less.
Mr. Stewart?
More money there, the more deer we can get. So I was just responding to what I heard.
Mr. Sewell?
I'm happy to second for discussion purposes. The only thing I don't have a good feel for is how many people would opt to take the deer, and so that we could get that savings. So that's why I kind of lean toward the higher amount, just so we can, like you said, get as many deer as possible. But I do understand the reasoning, though.
I believe that our conversations, or the anecdotal evidence from the other cities, is there's been more than enough people that have been willing to take the deer. And I have heard from at least one, I guess that's a pretty small number, but there is interest in the public, at least some. And anecdotally, it sounds like Highlands' experience has been there's been willing recipients.
Okay, so the substitute motion before us, can you read that back again? Sorry, it's getting a little convoluted. Or amendment. Okay. And the original motion by Mr. Stewart still includes the removal of Humphreys Archery and what else?
Well, in fact, let's address that procedural issue first, because the second was withdrawn. So, you're right, Mr. Winterton. Okay, never mind, I withdraw that.
Okay. So that is the motion before us with the amendment.
So,
Mr. Sewell?
one other question. I assume, regardless of the amount that we appropriate, that if there are people offering to take the deer, are we, Mayor Curtis, would we be open to that? I mean, is that going to happen anyway, or do you understand what I'm asking? Mayor Curtis?
So there's rumors circulating that more deer have died during this discussion. I really think you're straining at gnats here. Mr. Stewart, give us the money. Let us go do our job. We'll come and report. We don't know the answers to these questions because we've just never done this before. I don't know how many residents are going to take us up on the deer meat. We'll know in a few months. And we have some indication, and we'll do our best to maximize the value for our residents. We don't know how much work it will take to get the residents to take the meat. And we may reach a conclusion at some point it's just not worth it. to get the residents to take the meat, and that it's worth the $85. So I'd just suggest that you move forward, let us come back and report what we find and what we learn through this project, and I suspect we'll have a lot of good answers for you after the first round.
And one last question. If we do come in under whatever number we end up with here, could we assume that that'll sort of be rolled forward to the next year? So we, yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there other questions or comments? Mr. Van Buren?
And we've taken Humphreys out on the motion we're voting for now. Did George's initial motion have Humphreys in? So,
No, that's why it's out. So Mr. Stewart's original motion was to remove Humphreys in order to grant the administration flexibility to pursue removal however they see fit, which could include Humphreys. So the original motion was to take that out, so the substitute motion only changes the dollar figure. If right now we'd be voting right now you're just voting on whether it should be 30,000 or, and let me clarify that. At this moment, you're not actually voting on the ordinance, on the resolution. You're voting on whether or not
change the dollar.
The number should be changed before you vote on the resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
And the resolution doesn't include Humphreys?
Well, it doesn't right now, but again, you're not voting on that right now. So the question on the table is, should we amend
The amount to 30?
amend the amount to be 30? And that's the only question you're answering right now.
now, okay. So is there any other discussion? Those in favor? Those opposed? So those in favor are Mr. Harding, Ms. Santiago, and Mr. Connect, and those opposed are Mr. Van Buren, Mr. Sewell, Mr. Stewart, and Mr. Winterton. So the motion dies.
So then to follow up on what I was just saying right now, the motion that's now on the table, again, is actually still not to approve the resolution. It's to make the changes to the resolution that are on the screen. So at the moment, the next vote, assuming there's no more substitutes or amendments, the next vote would be whether or not to make those changes. If you make all of those changes, then you would vote on approving the resolution as it was now amended. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody.
And so for clarification, for the two amendments, we're changing the date is one of the amendments. And we're striking Humphreys
Right.
in the contract.
Right. All of the changes proposed by Mr. Stewart's motion are shown on the screen. So what you would be voting on right now is whether or not to make those changes to the document before you vote on the document.
And what if we want one of the changes, not both the changes? We haven't got that choice. I guess we'd vote against it and then add
Then you
that.
can either vote against it,
Okay.
or you could make a substitute motion to to eliminate one of the changes.
I'm sorry. Can I just clarify, there's three changes. The first change is the dollar amount. The second change is to the services performed during the fiscal year rather than just from August to December. And then the third change would be for
That's correct. And just, for clarification, the strikeouts that you see in lines 80 and 81, that's just a continuation of removing the Humphreys contract from the agreement and changing the Deer plan to be Exhibit A because now there's no longer an Exhibit A. So that's all part of that change.
Mr. Van Buren?
So Brian, could we make an amendment to the motion that's on the table now and put Humphreys back into this motion and then vote?
Yes.
Can I just, if you're going to do that, Kay, I don't have a problem with that, other than the fact that it just leaves everything wide open. If we do it this way, if we do it, we are saying Humphreys will be there, right?
No, I think we're saying if we decide to go the lethal route, if the administration comes back and says, then we'll use Humphreys to do that. I think that's what it says.
If we decide to do the lethal route, what if we decide to spend the whole 35 on non-lethal?
That's a possibility. So right now, the question that you're voting on is, should they get $35,000? Should that be for fiscal year 2016? And should you be silent as to who they spend the money with?
Maybe I can help clarify. Assuming this moves forward in almost any form that it's been presented tonight, we will immediately contact Brian Cook and get him under contract. And at the same time, we'll take the temperature of the neighborhoods. We'll find situations where that may or may not be the best approach. And we'll work diligently to come up with a plan in those neighborhoods if it doesn't work there. And we would also like to understand and use, to some degree, the non-lethal methods.
So my amendment stands. We'll need a second, I guess.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Sewell? Thank you. Is everybody clear on the motion? The amendment was to not strike line 2, to actually put Humphreys Archery back in.
So we wouldn't be making any changes to paragraph 2.
And I'm fine with that.
And I have a question.
Mr.
So
Knapp?
if we put it back to where it was originally, and put Humphreys back in, it says the mayor is authorized to execute an agreement, but it doesn't say he has to. So it's still optional, in my opinion. Or am I?
Yes,
He's expressed himself
that's,
well.
and that is always the
I'm
case.
going to go climb in one of these traps.
Okay. So those in favor? Those opposed? So those in favor are Mr. Connect, Mr. Van Buren, Mr. Sewell, Ms. Santiago, Mr. Stewart, and Mr. Winterton, and those opposed are Mr. Harding. Thank you.
No.
Now we do the resolution.
So now, the changes to paragraph 2 have been rejected, and the changes to paragraph 1 have been approved for your consideration. So you would now, it would be appropriate for there to be a motion to approve the resolution as currently amended.
So made.
Thank you, Mr. Van Buren. Is there a second? Mr. Harding, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Those in favor? And the voting is unanimous in the affirmative. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Howard, and those that are here from DWR. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Thank you, members of the public. I appreciate you commenting and helping us with this decision. So the next item of business is a discussion on a resolution ratifying a letter of commitment to Duncan Aviation for the installation and construction of certain utilities and infrastructure at the Provo Municipal Airport. And Mr. Parker, will you be presenting this item?
Madam Chair, thank you very much. As you'll recall from discussions 2 weeks ago, we've been working diligently on a plan to ensure that the needed infrastructure relative to the expansion of Duncan Aviation at the airport can be achieved. So 2 weeks ago, we met with the council, and in advance of the State Incentives Board making their decision, we asked you for essentially permission to represent the city's position that we will cover those infrastructure costs. The method for those we determined earlier today in the work session. But in order to meet the deadline for that, the mayor did submit the letter indicating we were committed to that. And this resolution simply asks you to ratify that action to ensure that there are no questions remaining about the city's intention. So that's what's before you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Parker? Or discussion? Mr. Sewell?
I'd like to make a motion for discussion purposes to approve the resolution ratifying a letter of commitment to Duncan Aviation for the installation and construction of certain utilities and infrastructure at the Provo Municipal Airport. And by way of explanation, I just want to say I feel like we're following through on commitments made years ago, and I'm very excited about the plans for the expansion, and just thrilled to hopefully get this going. So.
Mr. Van Buren?
I'd just like to second the motion.
Okay. Thank you for the second. And did you have a comment, Mr. Mayor?
Just before you vote, let me kind of echo what Councilman Sewell said. We've had a lot of great economic wins in the city, and this one has been a little bit more quiet because it started so many years ago. But I really believe what's happening with the consummation of this is a really, really strong economic boost for our city, and not just the city itself, but the school district and the county as well. This will bring some fantastic jobs in, and anybody that's rubbed shoulders with Duncan knows that these are just not ordinary people in an ordinary company. This is a company that we're very proud to have here in our city, and we're grateful that they were able to make it through some tough years, and that we're here tonight, and look forward to many, many great things.
Would you like to comment? Thank you. And I know I'd hammer your last name, but I want to say Pacheca. Is that not close?
Prohaska.
Paraska, I'm sorry.
Bill Prohaska.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for the support over the years. It was a tough time. Our industry came through 2008 with a tremendous negative impact, and we survived. We hunkered down, and we started a small operation, and now we're ready to move forward. So appreciate the city's support through all the time. And I did want to mention that we have seen deer removed from runways via Learjet, so. But there's no meat to harvest.
Mr. Gleason, did you want to comment?
I've commented.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other comments from council members? No, I just want to offer my thanks as well. Appreciate the opportunity to partner in this, and appreciate the good that it will do for our community. So then we'll call for a vote. Those in favor? Those opposed? The voting is unanimous in the affirmative. Thank you. The next item is a discussion on a resolution adopting a sewer system management plan, a system evaluation and capacity assurance plan, and the municipal wastewater planning program self-assessment report for Provo 2015. And this item will be introduced by Rebecca Andrus, an engineer in our Public Works Department.
Good evening, members of the council, Mayor. I'm glad to have this opportunity to present this item today. This presentation is an overview of Provo's sanitary sewer management program and the associated documents that are required as part of that program. The Utah Sanitary Sewer Management Program was initiated by the Water Quality Board, and as the main issue is to try to develop programs for the prevention, control, and abatement of new and existing pollutions to waters of the state. This is absolutely a water quality issue. It is similar to the MS4 program, and there is a permit that is associated with it that is a discharge permit similar to both the MS4 program and our discharge from our wastewater treatment plant, but it is a separate permit from both of those. And though it is a permit to discharge, the goal is actually to prevent discharge. And what we're trying to do, this is our wastewater collection system, and it includes all of the collection system and the lift stations, force mains, and everything associated with the collection system. And the goal is to keep all of the stuff in the collection system and not allow it to get out into the environment or to waters of the state. And so the focus is on properly maintaining and operating the system, allocating adequate resources, making sure that the cities are maintaining their system properly, and also planning for future. This general permit is required for all publicly operated sewer systems in the state. And there are 2 documents that are associated with this. These documents need to be approved by a governing body. They have to be public noticed, and they will be available at the Public Works office. We could also have them on the website for people to look at those if they need to. These documents are the Sanitary Sewer Management Plan and the System Evaluation and Capacity Assurance Plan. There's also an annual report that is required as part of this program. The plan itself basically is to plan, schedule, properly manage, operate, and maintain all parts of the sewer collection system so that we don't have any sort of overflows out into the environment or to waters of the state. We also don't want to overflow into people's basements or any other locations. So want to keep the water in the pipes. These pictures are our crews at work. This was actually taken, these pictures were taken yesterday, out cleaning and maintaining our system. So the sewer management plan, currently the way that it's written is just exactly what our crews are doing and have been doing for the past several years. It's written based on the best management practices that our crews have been implementing. I went back and looked at some statistics that we had from 2004 to 2008. There were 5 to 10 overflow situations a year of varying degrees. One year we did have an unfortunate incident where a dog got into our sewer and created a lot more overflows that year. But other than that, there were basically 5 to 10 a year. For the past few years, it's been closer to 1 to 2 because our crews are very efficient and making sure that they take care of things. Cleaning and maintaining our sewer lift stations, making sure that all of the pipes are in good working order, cleaning manholes, everything like that. So that's the first plan. The second plan is the System Evaluation and Capacity Assurance Program. And this basically is kind of a look forward to the future to say, what are our problems we're having now, and how are we planning to address them, both in capacity and maintenance in the future. So this plan includes all of the initial capacity modeling, flow monitoring. The city has recently purchased 2 mobile flow monitoring devices that we go around and move from place to place depending upon what issues we're having, if there's some suspected infiltration, if we have areas that we're looking to study further, like when we did the west side sewer study, we went and put our flow monitoring devices out there and checked it out to see what we're actually dealing with, and found luckily that we weren't having as many issues as we thought, so that was good. And here's the capital improvements plan that you've seen in your budget, and this will be replaced in this each year as we approve new capital improvement programs, and we'll just keep that going as part of the CCAP. And then the final thing is a self-assessment that we do each year. It is basically a look, an overview of, and this actually includes both our collection system and our wastewater treatment plant. So, and we give that to the state, and but they want to make sure that the council has seen all of these items and understands everything that's involved. Are there any questions?
Just a
Mr.
question.
Connect?
Yes, thank you. So if something does get in to the sewer and backs up the system, what liabilities does the city incur?
So depending upon if it's, in the main line or in just a lateral, if it's in just a lateral, then it's the homeowner's responsibility to take care of. If it's in the main line, what we do is if there is a backup into somebody's house, for instance, or into a business, we actually go in, we evaluate what's going on. We get a restoration company in there immediately, so there's minimal damage as much as possible. We clean the system, we check the main line, find out what's happened, why it's happened, what we need to fix to prevent it from happening in the future, and then we have our insurance people go out and look at it and, address that issue. And so we have a very comprehensive approach for any sort of a backup situation.
Mr. Knight, if I could just add on to that. And just for clarification, what she has just reiterated is long-standing city policy, but just for your information, the fact that a backup happens in the main line doesn't actually automatically mean that there is technical legal liability, but it has been long-standing city practice for the city to take care of backups that happen in the main line. Strictly from a legal standard, there would be a very fact-specific inquiry about whether or not whatever contributed to the main line backup was actually something that the city should have known about and should have done something to resolve. But notwithstanding, in order to kind of avoid that very technical analysis, and because of the impact that it has on our citizens and kind of as a customer service kind of attitude, it has been longstanding policy to automatically address mainline backups.
Mr. Hardy?
I'd like to thank Ms. Anders, and commend Public Works for these plans that have been put together. Reading through them really gave me a greater appreciation for the amount of work, the amount of planning, the amount of effort that goes into keeping our sewers flowing. And so I want to express appreciation for that.
Thank you, and I'll let everybody know.
Mr. Van Buren?
Can I just say thanks for one incident that happened over on 9th East to a young family that had some problems with what was main line, what was lateral, old records, and Terry Welch stepped up and
He is amazing.
treated them very kindly and took care of them, and it was just well done. So I thank you for.
And the fact is, this is just documenting all the stuff that they're doing. They've been doing this for a long time, and they really are very efficient at what they do, and they're working very hard to keep everything done in a very good manner. So.
I have one question, but I'm embarrassed that I didn't put the page number or the plan down. I've read through all of them, but I didn't separate in my notes for some reason. But I have a question about the CIP, and maybe this was in the.
It's in the CCAP at the end.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. So we can bring that up at the next, or do you want to go over that first and then? Okay, yeah. So there was another chart that talked about the 5-year CIP funding for 5 years and for 10 years, and there were zeros in all of those slots. And I'm wondering with the increases, with the utility increases, if future years, if that's going to change with what we're doing, that we will have money allocated for future CIP and it wouldn't be a zero on the 5-year and the 10-year plan.
So one of the
can you
things
explain
that
that?
we need to do as part of this program is to continue looking at each of these things each year and look at any sort of replacement or, going through and doing lining projects and different things like that. And we need to evaluate as the crews go out and find issues, we need to bring those up and address those and plan those for future. So there are some things that we haven't fully gotten into the CIP at this point.
Okay.
But we will continue to evaluate what needs to go into it and look at, the different funding sources and places for that.
Okay. And then my other question was kind of a general question. Do we, as far as new growth, what our capacity for new growth, what is sort of, I don't know, maybe that's too broad of a question, but how do we handle all the new growth? And is there a point where we say we can't handle it with the sewer system in its current state?
So we have a master plan that projects out 20 years, and it was completed, I believe, 2013 was kind of the final revision of it. And so that plans for future growth, but as we know, future growth kind of changes. Suddenly a high school maybe pops over to the other side of town or something, and we need to evaluate what the best things are to do in that case. So we do have a sewer model, and we are working on, updating that and kind of looking and focusing on different areas. And as we go into the future, we can evaluate some of these issues and look at if there's planning things that we need to do as far as zoning and different things to maintain the system and make sure that we're not making decisions that are putting it over capacity, or that if we are pointing that out and we are addressing that and finding money to take care of those issues.
Mr. Connect?
So on the west side, with all the growth we are experiencing, we not just the high school, but Broadview Shores, and the fact that we have to pump it all back to the middle of town, I always favored a separate facility out there that was gravity. I wear another hat. I'm a emergency preparedness specialist, and so I think of things like if the power goes out for a week, and do you have the backup, and if you don't have the backup, then we got a real problem.
This is definitely true. So we are, I believe that one of the items that has been presented previously was kind of a discussion of the overall master plan for the sewer treatment facility and whether it makes sense to continue in its current location or whether it makes sense to move it. That, I believe, is still out there for consideration because there are some issues like that when you're pumping so much. However, our current lift stations that we are designing right now, there's one for Broadview Shores and there's another one that's going to be associated with Duncan Aviation. Both of those have backup generators that are actually integrated right into it. They're a part of it, so they're not, something you'd have to bring in or deal with in any other way. So that does provide some backup to those facilities. We'd have to look at
For how long?
Yeah, we'd have to look at exactly how long, and that answer I don't have right off the top of my head. So we can check that out, but they will provide backup for that, and basically as long as we can provide gas for them, they'll provide backup for us. So.
Thanks.
Are there other questions? All right, thank you. Bring it back for discussion among council or a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve a resolution adopting the sewer system management plan.
Thank you, Mr. Winterton. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Those in favor? Thank you. The voting is unanimous in the affirmative. We'll now look for a motion to recess as the municipal council and reconvene as the redevelopment agency of Provo. Thank you, Mr. Sewell. Second. Thank you, Mr. Winterton. Those in favor? Thank you. The voting is unanimous in the affirmative.
6, a discussion on a resolution authorizing the preparation of a draft Parkway Plaza redevelopment community reinvestment project plan area. Mr. Walters?
Mr. Chair, members of the Redevelopment Agency, good evening. The item before you tonight is a resolution kicking off a proposed community development, changing the law, the community reinvestment project area for the Plumtree Plaza. As you know, Plumtree Plaza has recently been purchased by Westport Capital out of Southern California, and they are looking to make some significant investments into that center, including demolishing most of the building structures there. And to help install the necessary infrastructure, they are looking for some tax increment financing that would put in the infrastructure and help construct parking structures to accommodate the office projects that they are hoping to build in its location. This resolution tonight is the kickoff for creating the community reinvestment project area plan that would come back to the agency board for approval after the appropriate noticing period to the public. That is staff's presentation. I'm available for any comments.
Any questions for Mr. Walters? Thank you, David. Bring it back to the council for discussion and a motion. Yes, sir. Yes, David.
I will move that I'm on the wrong page, but I move that we resolve that we authorize the preparation of the draft plan for the redevelopment community reinvestment project plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Kim. Thank you. All in favor? Well, is there any discussion on the motion? I'm sorry.
I just didn't know, when you read that, did you add the words Parkway Plaza to the redevelopment?
I will, I move that we authorize the draft as indicated in our documents.
As written.
Still, is there a second still then?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0 unanimous. We'll move to adjourn as the redevelopment agency and reconvene as the city council. Is there a second to that? There's a second. All in favor? Yes.
The next item is a public hearing on an ordinance amending the notice requirements for certain public hearings before the Planning Commission to mirror state code and allowing amendments to the general plan more often than twice per year. This item will be introduced by Aaron Ardmore, planner.
Thank you, Council. As reported in study today, this amendment comes out from discussions with planning staff and members of the council. It basically covers three things. The first is reducing or removing that restriction to general plan amendments of twice a year, allowing those to come in as submitted, which would help speed up the review process and allow the public to have a timely decision. The other part of it is ensuring neighborhood meetings are called for general plan and zone amendments applications. And the third would be reducing the Planning Commission noticing period from 14 days to 10 days because of updated technology and things of that nature. We don't need the 14 days to get those notices out anymore. In addition to those items presented to you in the staff report, our attorney Brian Jones, or your attorney Brian Jones, has made a couple of amendments since this staff report was given to you, and even since our study meeting today. Staff has reviewed those and fully supports those changes to these ordinance amendments.
So if I could just comment on that. The version that's on the screen in front of you right now is the same as the one that was discussed in work session, containing additions that I added since the Planning Commission to address this concern over a neighborhood potentially refusing or failing to have the meeting that the statute requires, and then either the neighborhood or a third party claiming that that meant the city council could never consider the amendment because the meeting hadn't been held. Ryan, can you put up version 2 as well? After some discussion, and then scroll down to that same section. After some discussion that happened in work session about the nature of the language that was added, I met briefly with Mr. Sewell and Bill Pepperoni from Community Development and made some minor edits to that potentially address some of the concerns that were raised in the work session. You'll see that in paragraph B sub 2, beginning at line 135, this version has stricken the language that talks about failure to hold the meeting being a violation of the statute by the neighborhood chair. And it simply just says that failure to hold a meeting doesn't invalidate the rest of the process. So those two versions are before you, and you could, as discussion goes forward, it'd be appropriate at some point for there to be a motion as to which one of those versions you want to begin your consideration with.
Mr. Knecht?
So, question, Brian. We've been working on the premise that the failure to hold the meeting would probably be because the neighborhood chair didn't want to or whatever, but what if the failure is because the developer refuses to show up at the meeting or causes the problem? and/or doesn't want a meeting?
Well, there is, let me open this back up again. Ryan, can you scroll back up to the previous page?
I know it says he should have, but it then seems like we're saying if it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter.
Let's see. No, sorry, let's see. Go down to the last page. Keep scrolling down. I want to. So, this is the requirement. This is the requirements of the developer regarding what constitutes a completed application. And if you scroll all the way down to the sub B that's added at the end, it requires the developer to contact the neighborhood chair for the neighborhood affected by the application. So I guess I have two thoughts on that. One is that if the developer does not contact the neighborhood chair, then they're in violation of this section, and I would imagine that both the Planning Commission and the council would take that into consideration in their consideration of the application. And then with respect to, if they satisfy this section by contacting the neighborhood chair but then refuse to show up at the meeting, logistically speaking, my expectation is that the neighborhood would come and report to you that they held a meeting at which the developer was not present, and that you would consider that in deciding whether to grant the application or not. So.
Are there other questions? Mr. Sewell?
I'd like to make a motion to start things off, and this would be the recommendation of the Development Approval Process Review Committee, or more specifically, 2 council members on the committee, and all of the administrative people that have expressed an opinion have been in favor of it. So my motion would be that we start the discussion by adopting this. And again, this is just for purposes of selecting the draft that we're talking about. This second one with the amendments that Mr. Jones showed us this morning as modified by the change that he just explained to us. That makes sense.
You know, removing the language about violation of the section by the neighborhood chair.
Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Van Buren. I have a question. Can you scroll to the top of this? Right, hold on. I think no, it's off the screen now. Sorry, if you can scroll slowly down. I think it's the first part in red. That's the paragraph. Again, I didn't mark the line number in work session right here for just a second. It's the one that talks about reviewing the plan, and you change the wording to something considering.
88.
It's 88.
It's on the
Oh, right there. The plan shall be comprehensively reviewed at least every 5 years instead of updated. What was the rationale behind that change? Mr. Sewell?
Just a point of clarification here. So that language is in both of the drafts. So could we limit the discussion to which draft we're going to start with, and then vote on that, and then go from there? Would that be all right?
Sure. That would make it less confusing.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's the motion that's on the table. And the only difference between the two drafts is the draft considered by Mr. Sewell's motion does not have the language in it that talks about a violation of the section by the neighborhood chair. That's the only difference between the two.
Okay, so we'll vote on that first, then we'll talk about the rest of the document. That sounds good. Okay, so any more discussion on the motion? Those in favor? Thank you. The voting is unanimous in the affirmative. Okay, so then, do you want to address the question, or was it somebody, or
Let's see.
someone know why that was recommended to be changed?
I'm trying to remember. This language came from community development. Do you remember any discussion about it, Aaron?
I don't. Bill said that this is the language that he had worked on with members of the council, so I don't have a whole lot of
I think, if I'm remembering right, I think the language was changed with the idea that we would review it every 5 years, or maybe this may have even come from you, Mr. Jones, this suggestion, now that I think about it, to leave open the possibility that if we're happy with the review, we may not necessarily want to change anything. I think that was the...
There was a significant discussion in a work session a while back about what comprehensive update means. And I think, and I don't know that I recommended this specific language, but I think some of the questions that were asked during that discussion led us to say, a comprehensive update sounds like it means we're expecting it to be completely rewritten every 5 years, and it didn't seem like anybody thought that was what we really meant, but that every 5 years, the entire document ought to be looked at to see if anything needed to be rewritten, and all of those rewrites would be part of that review. So, I don't know that I proposed this specific language, but I think that's where it came from.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that now.
Mr. Connect?
So that's how I remember it. But I look at this, I would be more comfortable if it said that the plan would be comprehensively reviewed and updated as needed. Maybe there's no update needed, but you update whatever you feel needs to be.
Didn't the state require it every 5 years?
No, I don't think it requires every 5 years that we do a comprehensive update.
No, not a comprehensive, but had to be at least reviewed every 5 years. I think, wasn't there a term of 5 years?
I can't remember the exact date, but there was a time frame that it needs to be reviewed. We're looking for right now.
I was thinking that it had to be done, something had to be looked at, reviewed comprehensively 5 years.
I think this would fulfill that requirement, but if we make it clear that we're wanting to first review before we embark on any update, if any.
Mr. Van Buren?
I kind of think the word reviewed means that if we think we need to update it, we will. I don't think we have to write that in. And we're not going to review and say, yeah, we're not going to change it because it doesn't tell us to change it. I think we're only going to change it if we review it and say, now I say we, the council, it won't be we, but anyway.
Are there any other questions or thoughts? Mr. Connect?
So what does that mean to you as a planner? If we just leave it that way, what message does that send to you?
The word reviewed assumes that the review, if you come out of that with needed updates or needed changes, needed additions, appendices, whatever it may be, that would happen every 5 years. So the review implies, I believe, an update if needed.
So you prefer this rather...
That's how I would interpret it.
Okay, but you do prefer this over saying that an update is mandatory?
I do. As we've seen in the past, it doesn't always need to be updated or changed on a large level.
Mr. Harding?
As Mr. Sewell pointed out, that the two members of the Development Approval Process Review Committee wanted to move forward with this. If I may, I'd just like to express my minority opinion that I agree that there's a problem, and I agree that the way that things are proceeding now is not the way that they should proceed, but I feel like this, removing the timing restriction is addressing one of the symptoms of the greater problem, and rather than addressing the greater problem, in our information, we have a spreadsheet there. On the second tab, it shows that 31 amendments were heard over the past 6 years. So greater than, on average, more than 5 per year are heard. And if we look at the general plan as not necessarily a zoning map, but as a plan of how we want to proceed with development and how we want to organize our city, I think it should cause some concern that more than 5 times a year we're changing our plan. I think there are times where plans need to be changed and updated, but I would suggest that if we're doing this 5 times a year, we're changing our plan 5 times a year. Maybe that suggests that our plan is too specific, and my opinion is that that is a problem with our general plan, that we're using it almost as a secondary zoning map. If someone comes in and proposes a development that everyone agrees, oh yeah, that makes sense to have it there. This is what we expected. This is the kind of thing we want to see. If they have to put in a general plan amendment, to me that suggests that our general plan didn't actually contain what our plan was for the area. And so I think if we have a general plan that really contains a high level, this is generally where we want this kind of development, this is generally what should be done over here, then we won't need general plan amendments nearly as often. And if we have a strong plan that we're committed to implementing, I don't think a twice yearly timing restriction is unreasonable. I think it's only unreasonable because of the way that we're using our general plan. So, at this point, I don't think I'm going to be, swaying the vote anywhere here. But I guess so. I'm going to put in a plea that when we go into our general plan update, that I believe is on the docket for later this fall, that we treat it as a plan. And so if something, it may be agriculture right now, and maybe we may not want to rezone it for, say, residential, but if it's our plan that we will have residential there, that we get that into the general plan and leave to the zoning map to restrict it to residential until we get a proposal that we like. And so I don't necessarily, I actually think that twice yearly amendments is not unreasonable. I think it's actually would be beneficial, but our problem is the way that we're using the general plan. So I'm hoping we can fix those greater problems that this fall, and I hope maybe we would consider putting back on the twice yearly restrictions once we have a more functional general plan.
Mr. Hardmore?
If I can respond to that, I think that makes sense. If I can respond to that, you mentioned the 33 position.
Try the other one.
It's not working as well as the other one was. Is the other one out of battery? Yeah. Yes. Sorry.
It's okay.
Don't we have a handheld? No, we have a handheld right here.
Okay, so out of the 33 general plan amendments, you'll notice that a lot of those, if not the majority, came from staff. And I think it's important to note that the general plan amendments are much more than just the general plan map. So a number of those were adding appendices to the general plan with neighborhood plans or changing text in the general plan. I just thought that's an important thing to note in this discussion.
Mr. Connect?
Well, and we have a lot of things that are parts of the general plan. We're constantly reviewing and updating neighborhood plans. We have the downtown economic district, downtown plan, so many different plans, the bicycle master plan being added. It's a work in progress, and it should be. I think we need to be nimble, we need to be responsive. You never know when someone's going to plop down a high school somewhere, and things happen. I support this. If I felt it was compromising the integrity of the city or neighborhoods, then I wouldn't vote for it. And if it, like anything else, if it has unintended consequences, that's what our job is, to hopefully with the help of staff who would say, hey, you created a problem. And we have to have that kind of feedback, whether it be from the public or from staff. And when we do get that feedback, then we need to respond. But I'll be voting for this.
Mr. Sewell?
Cliff, could we pull up that spreadsheet just for a minute with the general plan statistics on it? The one we showed in work meeting today, it's called General Plan Amendment Research, I think. So just a couple of things I wanted to mention from that. And by the way, I'm open to the possibility of improving our general plan amendment process, making it more high level. But I see this as sort of fixing a flaw in the current process, as opposed to undertaking a bigger overhaul. So let's go to the next tab. So of those 33 requests in the last 6 years, only, if you look in the left column, only 7 of them came from citizens or private developers. So all of the rest, the timing restriction doesn't necessarily apply. Now, in some cases, staff did time it so that it came in on the twice a year time, but they wouldn't have needed to if they didn't want to. So most of these people that are applying, if they know about this, the option to get a waiver, and if they know somebody on the council they're comfortable talking about, they can usually get a waiver of this restriction. So that's one of the things that bothers me the most about the current process, is that it's sort of a little arbitrary, kind of depends on how much you know and how connected you are with elected officials, whether you have to incur that delay or not. And then the other thing that concerns me about it is I don't know of any other situation where we as individual council members sort of have the power to grant an administrative waiver is kind of the way I look at it. So I just would really like to get us out of that business and just have a process that's fast and efficient for everyone. So, oh, and one last thing, let's go to the third tab, just to highlight the support that this has gotten from the various departments that have been involved in the development process review, and obviously staff has recommended it, and Planning Commission supported it 5-0. So I hope we can move ahead with it.
So we've talked about sort of streamlining this and taking away the arbitrary nature of it. What are what are the outcomes that we hope to see for our city as far as our goals, our city goals? How does this move us forward toward accomplishing our city goals with this change in the way we're doing things? Mr. Sewell?
So a couple of things that I would respond to that. One is in the spirit of what we're trying to do with the Development Approval Process Review Committee. I think anything that streamlines the development approval process, makes it more efficient and fair, is good for development. It's good for economic development, and that's a benefit to the city. The more property tax and sales tax that we get from commercial entities, the less the burden that we need to place on our residents. So that's a definite benefit, I think. And I don't see this as us being any less choosy or careful about the type of development that we bring in, so I don't think that's affected. But let's say even if we have a development that is undesirable, in the current process, there's the possibility that if the developer can't get a council member to request a waiver, it may be delayed for up to 6 months. And I think that's bad for the city because they may be tying up the property, they may have an option on it for something that the council ultimately is going to reject anyway. So I think it's fairest and most efficient for them to get an answer as soon as they can. Go through the process and get an answer. If we like it, it'll move ahead. If we don't, then somebody else can come in with something better. So.
Is there any concern about the, I guess if I looked at the other cities, if we can put that
first tab
document up, yeah, that first tab up.
The first tab in the spreadsheet.
As we looked at the other cities and their, the number of, that they don't have any restrictions and their fees. But there was one that had the number of plans that they, it's right over there.
8 to 10.
8 to 10 per year, I guess it's only one. It'd be interesting to see if the cost or the fee has anything to do with the frequency. Do you see that being a problem? So our fee is $560, where other cities of similar size seem to be charged more for that. They don't have a restriction, but they charge more for a change.
No,
Is that something else?
This is 6 months old, so I can't remember if this is one that we adjusted or not.
Okay, so we did adjust that with that was increased. Okay. And I can't remember what it seems like we did, but I can't remember what that was. 900? I can't remember. Right. And I ask that because I do think about the neighborhood chairs and the number of meetings, and I guess that would depend, how many developments are going in any one neighborhood, but will they be inundated with lots of plan changes and the chairs required to hold the meetings, and yet, and we don't have that many right now. And so I just wonder if we're changing this just a little bit, is that, could that create a large amount of applications?
I don't see this opening up to a lot of general plan amendments. But like Mr. Knight alluded to, if it's something that causes a problem, it's something that we can come back with and say, this has opened up the door to way too many issues, we need to bring it back a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, and I guess we could do that anytime. Initially I was thinking maybe if we evaluate it for a year and then, at a time certain, a year from now, it would be nice to see the data, to see what, has it helped, has it hindered, has it done anything? And it'd be nice to have that kind of data, knowing what this change caused. Okay. Mr. Harding?
So just to maybe clarify just a little bit, I see this solution a little bit like a Band-Aid, and maybe that's all we need in the interim. I think if we can write our general plan to be more general, I think to address Mr. Sewell's thought, if we had a general plan that really communicated to developers and other stakeholders what we actually want to see go into our city, then maybe that bad development, the person would look at it and say, well, hey, what I'm going to propose does not match the plan, and the plan actually reflects what the council is looking for, therefore I'm not even going to submit it in the first place. Or someone says, I've got a great idea, but it doesn't meet the general plan. So if it's so good that I think that the city needs to update their plan to accommodate it, I know that this is going to be a 6-month process. So to me that's the bigger issue. And so the question isn't whether we pass this or not. I just hope we don't think that, oh, we've got a Band-Aid on that problem and so we don't need to worry about it anymore. So I'll probably be voting for this, but I hope we don't take the immediate pain away, and so we don't look at the deeper issues later on.
Are there other comments or questions?
Just make a motion to approve.
Okay, so we already have a motion on the table.
No, we don't.
Oh, we don't?
We voted.
Oh, we just did vote, we voted on the
language.
the writing, sorry. It's getting a little late. Thank you, Mr. Van Buren. And so you're voting to approve the resolution as it is before us with the amendments? Is there, I didn't mean to rewrite or restate your, but I just want to make sure we're all clear on what we're voting on. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Winterton. Those in favor? As amended.
That's correct, as the ordinance has been amended.
Okay, so those in favor? The voting is unanimous in the affirmative. The last item is a discussion on an ordinance amending Chapter 8.02, Animal Control Generally, with regards to keeping of swine, and this will be presented by Mr. Jones.
Yes, thank you. As you're aware, this amendment has been discussed a couple times in work session. This was brought forward as a proposal by the legal office, stemming out of some concerns. There was a previous incident where there were some pigs that were being kept on agricultural property, but in near proximity to residential property, and there were several negative impacts on the residential homeowners who were actually there before the pigs. And those have been ameliorated via some legal action, but we were looking at a long-term solution, and we found a section of state code that specifically authorizes cities to regulate, as it says here in lines 10 through 12, any pigsty, privy, barn, corral, sewer, or other unwholesome or noxious house. And so based on that, there was a recommendation to restrict any pig keeping so that it has to be confined into a secure outdoor enclosed area located at least 300 feet from any boundary line. And this ordinance would amend city code to put that restriction in.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Jones? Mr. Stool?
Real quick one. Do you see any ambiguity in the phrase "any boundary line"? I mean, is it clear what that means?
If we were, I thought about this earlier today. If we were really to drill down, I suppose there's potentially an ambiguity. Let's say there's a person who owns multiple parcels of property, and they're operating their farm over multiple parcels, right? In a very technical sense, since this is from any boundary line, that could be construed to mean you have to have it 300 feet from the edge of your second parcel, even though you still own it. As a practical matter, I'm not concerned about that because I don't think there's, I think it's clear that's not the intent, and I don't think there's any danger that the city officials would ever construe it or interpret it in that way. That is a potential ambiguity, but I think it's frankly probably more pain than it's worth to try to construct a fix.
Okay.
Mr. Connect?
I would tend to agree that a boundary would be a difference between my property and your property and not construed as parcels within my own property.
Right.
And Mr. Beagley brought up something in the public comment about feedlots, and this would include feedlots being that?
Well, all this does is it specifically says that if you have a pigsty, that it has to be secure and that it has to be 300 feet from a property line. I interpreted Mr. Beagley's comment to say that in addition to passing this, he was also inviting the council to go back and look at the other proposal that for at least now has been tabled, and to address feedlots through that or through some other ordinance. This would address, I mean, if it is a swine feedlot, it would be applicable in the sense that it would have to be secure and it would have to be 300 feet from the property line because any keeping of swine has to meet that requirement.
So that does take care of that requirement. I thought he meant two different things. The stocking rate, when he explained the maximum number of livestock on a piece of land, and I thought he meant the feedlot to be part of, to make sure that that was included on the swine, because that was an issue of the feedlot being right next to his property. But this, because it has to be 300 feet, it's taken care of with what we currently have.
Right, right.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
Can I move that we pass the ordinance amending Chapter 8.02 with regards to the keeping of swine?
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Van Buren. Any discussion? Those in favor? Thank you. The voting is unanimous in the affirmative. Now, look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Van Buren. The second. Thank you, Mr. Sewell. Those in favor? Unanimous in the affirmative. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for hanging with us this whole night.